Okay, this is an instructional thing for people that don't know what blue means. So this is what's given to you when you registered, and you see this stuff here. You got the Zoom links. That's what you click that on, and that's what you're here. Today is the program. So you click this on, and you will see, hopefully, if it works. I got a slow I'm doing this from home. So let's see what we got here. And this is our program. That was yesterday. And when we scroll down, there's a 10-minute break. And I believe what we did today is basically Emil's session is panels. And so we've got the name of the panels down here and the order. Okay.
All right. And so go to my list there.
I know I'm trying to go down
here. Are you okay?
Yeah. We won't go. I should have stayed in my other place. Oh, here we go.
Here we go. I think.
Come on. Oh, there we go. You see how that is? You have immigration law.
Yeah.
You have the panels. It's already listed, and it's all in the program. Okay. Right.
Okay.
Okay.
And then let's see.
One of the things here that I wanted to show too is let me get this up. There's also a timeline that we provided to give people context. One was a makeshift thing that I did. And again, when you click the blue, you'll come up with all these different dates and what happened during that time. The third one here is put together by Third and Dreesen. It's a very, very nice panel that's on display now at the Seattle Public Schools. The next one here is FANHS Legacy Month. What we've done, our chapter has done, is we honored each day in October for particular people that gave time for FANHS. There are a lot of people don't realize that it took 40 years to get to where we are. And that's why we have such a nice following, intergenerational following. People grew up on FANHS, people had babies with FANHS, and so that's what we do with FANHS Legacy Month. This thing here is the 30th anniversary of our first FANHS video. People don't remember that. 30 years ago, we unveiled Filipino Americans discovering their past for the future. And when you click on this, and this was a big deal on the East Coast. See, the problem here on the East Coast is that there's a lot of misconception and misinformation about, why are these monos important, and that's the kind of stuff that I had to deal with because I was getting flack. We were being called the Filipino American Hysterical Society, right?
Well, why is that? Hysterical because
the stories I talked about was racism, discrimination. They cannot believe it. They cannot believe that there was racism in the streets.
That's why
when we showed that video, remember, Auntie Dorothy, we showed the video back east. A lot of people were going, "That's not me. That's not us. They're not well dressed, right? They don't have fancy houses." So it's a good wake up call. But I want to put that out there because the people that were always talking bad about, especially this one group, when Uncle Fred put out his book, Filipinos, Forgotten Asian Americans, they were saying, this is not a history book. This is paperback. This thing is worthless, right? And so when we came back up to DC with the video and so on, they were just criticizing. That's not us. I said, well, let's put it this way. There's very, very limited information on Filipino American history. How come you're not in the book? Anyway, let me get back to that's what I want. That's why I'm picking these things out for you guys to know why I'm pointing this stuff out. FANHS Now, which is us, we have a YouTube channel. So we have other programs so you guys could tune in. Like last 2 years ago, Emil, we did the 50th anniversary of the Far West Convention.
Oh,
So it's
yeah,
all
yeah.
there. It's all there. So with that said, I just wanted to share, this is what everybody is getting as far as registered. As of now, we have about 560 people have registered. And so it was mind-boggling last night, even though, well, we had like 150, 170 people show up on, the actual show. I've never seen so many people in a meeting room like that. And I was kind of getting dizzy as far as, what was going on. But with that said, we're at 6:56 my time, and we're going to start. Okay.
We're going to start?
Yes, we're going to start because Edwina's going to say a few words, and then we're going to give it to the great Emil Guillermo. So, with that said, Auntie Dorothy, go ahead. Unmute, Auntie Dorothy. Auntie Dorothy, you want to unmute? Did she want to say something? There you go. Unmute, Auntie Dorothy.
Judy and Joe haven't checked in yet, have they?
Judy Pataxil, I don't know. She's in the first group.
Yeah. And Joe Galura. Emil, if they come in later, we'll just bring them in.
Yeah, you just direct message me, and when they're in, I mean, we'll go with Mel, Chris, Judy's next after that, and then Chris Underwood.
Yeah.
And if they're not here, we'll go with Joey Tobacco, and then Tess Guerzon.
Checked in yet?
Oh, he's there, Joey.
Yeah,
so,
Joey.
The way it looks right now, whoever talks during this session would have a little bit more time.
Well, Joe Galura is here. I message me, so we'll just call him up.
Yeah, they'll be coming in.
Yeah, a lot of people come in. So go ahead. I think it's 3:58 Pacific time, and so Alan.
Okay.
Should we get?
I am recording this. My name is Alan Bergano. I'm with the Filipino American National Historical Society Hampton Roads chapter. The program you're seeing is FANHS Now, which is a online virtual program that we put together and started back during COVID in 2021. And this is like our this is actually our second biggest program. And I'm glad that everybody's here. But before we even start, I would like to say a few words. Let's everybody bow your heads, close your eyes, and think about those who could not be with us tonight, especially those who left the Philippines, who came to America to put a roof over our heads, food in our stomachs, and to provide us opportunities that were denied to them. Thank you. At this time, I'd like to introduce to you the co-founder of the Filipino American National Historical Society Hampton Roads chapter. She was an intern for Auntie Dorothy from the very beginning. And I'm a lucky man because she happens to be my best friend and my wife, Edwina Lapa Bergano.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. I hope you can hear me. I just wanted to say welcome to the program tonight. This program is sponsored by the FANHS National, but we are the Hampton Roads chapter. We are the one that's putting this program together, and it's an honor to be part of Auntie Dorothy's when she needs us to do a program, we're here for her. We're here for the Board of Trustees as well. I just wanted to mention to you that my husband mentioned that I'm a former student intern. I was there when Marina Espina had presented the information of the Manila Men about the Louisiana. I was there. I was young, but I was there. Also, I wanted to mention that I'm the co-founder, of course, the Hampton Roads chapter. If you don't know where Hampton Roads is, it's in southern Virginia, near the North Carolina border, but we are in Virginia Beach, and we're located in the largest naval base in the world. And I'm currently a FANHS trustee member. So just wanted to give you some heads up about our program and how we was able to make this program possible. But the program tonight is a result of community building of friendships that start sharing our stories since the making of FANHS over 40 years ago. So this is a very special moment for us. It's a combination of friendship and chapters and just collaborating and creating friendships. And I'm so honored that you're all part of our FANHS family, and I hope we can continue to be part of our family afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Edwina. And now, without further ado, the great Emil Guillermo.
Not so great, not so great. But I'm here. I'm healthy, and tomorrow is my birthday, so this should be a good thing. This should be a good thing, and I'm looking at my birthday a little differently because of this event, this FANHS Filipino American History 101 Day 2. Before we go on, let me just I guess they call this housekeeping. I want you all to mute yourselves. So there's no side conversations. We don't hear any eruptions that you don't want people to hear. And so you can just hear the people who are talking, because it's going to be more than me. Right now, it's going to be me because, as people come in, I'm like the opening hymn at a church gathering. This is like the procession. You'll get. I'm trying to give the broad overview about what's going to happen in these next 2 or so hours. If you like something, now, if you mute yourself, if you like something, point your finger, wag it back. I mean, you can click your fingers or something, but this way we can mute. You can show some response. People can see you. If you want to talk, go to the reaction button down the bottom and raise your hand, and I'll be alerted and we'll call on you at the appropriate time. We had the nice prayer from Alan. We don't have the color guard, unfortunately, but we do have the convocation by Alan. So I think every Filipino gathering has to start with some kind of spiritual prayer, hoping that we will be guided. I saw that yesterday, and I know that Alan does this for all the FANHS Now events. I think it's a great thing. So here we are gathered on Zoom, not because we missed the pandemic, but because we can all gather without flying or driving or parking to consider history. Now you say, well, what's that, Emil? Well, it's things that never happened before. History, remarkable history. In October, it just tends to be the month for Filipino history, big history. Filipinos landing in North America in 1587, October 18th, documented history. Filipinos dropping blood on Morro Bay. That's where they landed. Morro Bay in what is or would be California. 33 years before the Pilgrims, before Jamestown, on the Filipino side of America, we were here. And if we don't say it, if we're not proud of it, no one will mention it, because no one has to date except FANHS when it said Filipino American history is October because of October 18th, 1587. It's big history, Filipinos landing in North America. Sure, they were just the help. They stepped on foot in Pedro de Unamuno's boat, but one Filipino was killed. The Spanish declared it for Spain, but the first people to step foot were Filipinos. The first to drop blood were Filipinos. And by the standard question, it's this kind of a joke when I say, Abbott and Costello, who's first? The Filipinos were first, October 18th, 1587. And then there's the small history. I was born October 9th. It happened just once. It was my birth, Emil Guillermo Jr., so I'm a June. This is the first time ever that I realize I am not my chronological age biologically. I am my Filipino age. And I say I am 118, the age of my father, Emil Guillermo Sr., the American national, not a citizen, the Filipino-born colonial who came to America in 1928 on a dollar steamship to America, he would have been 118 this year. And I accept the fact that I am 118 because he was the first generation. I'm the second generation. But he was not lucky enough to start immediately a family. Not in 1928, not in 1938, not in 1948, not until the 50s. What happened? History, a racist history. Why were we so plugged up, or just damned? What stopped us? Was it the 14-to-1 ratio Filipino men to women because Filipinos were brought in to be labor? Was it the anti-miscegenation laws when you could be lynched or shot just for looking at a white woman? When I was born, I was the second generation. But when I met fellow FANHS members like Peter Jamero and Herb Jamero, who also grew up in California, I realized I was treated like the first. And so my dad's story and my story are really one. He got screwed, and what happened to him impacted me. And that's the power of our history. We can't escape it. So I say, like my father, I am 118 years old tomorrow. And we're here today to tell our personal stories and see how the history happened to us. When it's the first time it happened, it's historic. And if it happens again and again, then we're in the pattern of history. And we see it when we come together to tell our stories. In Filipino American History 101, this is what you need to know to understand why we are so effed up, Filipinoed up. It's our story. And we are the primary sources, as we established yesterday. We lived it. This is day 2. The first day was led by Auntie Dorothy Cordova, which was a great eye-opener. I was in New York doing my play, Emil Amok, Lost NPR host, An American Filipino History. And she called me up out of the blue and said, we've got to do this class for Filipino American History Month. And I said, yeah. And initially she said she wanted me to do part of my show. And I said, I'm not going to do my show. I'm going to talk about the history in my show. And I hope that people will ask me to come to their town and perform it live while I'm still alive, because, I am 118. So we talked about the first chapters yesterday of Filipino American History 101. But here's the thing. I don't think you could put too fine a point on this. Our community is one of love and family based on our response and reaction to an extreme racism and hate that we felt from day one, from 1898, because we are marking this 125th year from the Treaty of Paris, 1898, when the Philippines was given from Spain to the U.S. Given the colonialism of 125 years, we established yesterday. We saw the New York Times headline. It was a real estate deal, but it was a racist real estate deal. $20 million. That's less than the Jets pay their quarterback, Aaron Rodgers. The U.S. was super gentrifying the Philippines, only they forgot to really gentrify it. They gave us education in English designed by friends of McKinley and Taft at Harvard. It was our Harvard education. They taught us English. That one book, The History of the Philippines, written by a white man. It was good brainwashing because my father who was born there, got that education, the one book Harvard education, and gladly paid $60 to take a 30-day ride on a steamboat to America, the USS Franklin Pierce, during the Depression in 1928. He thought he'd hit the jackpot. As an American national, he was always considered less than. It was an act of colonialism. Let's not try to make it into a nice thing. Colonialism is subjugation. It's a negative thing. But look at it this way in the current day. The U.S. in the role of Russia, the Philippines in the role of Ukraine, a sovereign nation. Because that's what happened in 1898 when that treaty was signed. It brought out a response from the Filipinos, who formed the first Asian democracy, the Morelos Republic, in 1899, and that started the Filipino-American War. And if you really want to impress your friends, say, yeah, and this is where American, Filipino American history and African American history really merged, because the Buffalo Soldiers came to the Philippines. And there was one in particular, an African American from Tampa, David Fagan, one of the first to desert and join the Filipinos and fight on behalf of the Filipinos, because he heard a commanding officer use the N-word. And the N-word didn't relate to him. The N-word, he was talking, the N-word was the F-word. They were talking about Filipinos. And so David Fagan was one of the first soldiers to desert and join the Filipinos. You need to know about that, because 1898 comes at the same time as real anti-Asian sentiment in the United States, the Chinese and the Japanese exclusion. The U.S. was not friendly to Asians except to those that they owned, the Filipinos. And so we were American nationals. And my father was the first in that group, 1905. He was born under the American flag, so brainwashed by that American curriculum. He comes in 1928. And yesterday you may have heard Herb Jamero, who was talking about California and the hate that was present in California. He was cut off from the internet, but it was in 1929. Herb was saying, from the very county he lived in, the legislators started anti-Filipino legislation that was real and strong and hateful. They did not want the quote unquote peaceful penetration of the Filipino to occur. In fact, it was a white purity movement. It was racist in the 1920s and 30s. The basis of the most racist immigration law, 1924, it spilled over in 1924, where we saw zero quotas on Asians, except for Filipinos, because they were nationals. When the racism in California was so pervasive, there were riots. How can we not mention Fermin Tabera in that first chapter in Watsonville, the man who was shot in his bunk for dancing with a white woman? The hatred was real toward Filipinos. And remember the COVID period. Remember the hatred over the last 3 to 4 years, when Filipinos were being mistaken and slashed and killed and stopped for, being responsible for the COVID virus. Filipinophobia was real in America during the pandemic, and just as real in the 20s and 30s. We were lynched and killed. People don't understand that. Don Mabalin's book, Little Manilas in the Heart, talks about that, when the lynchings reported in the Filipino ethnic media, not so much in the white media. They reported the Filipino riots, but the lynchings were reported in Stockton and Lodi in the Filipino ethnic media. It's the reason my father stayed in San Francisco when he got off the boat. It was too foggy. They couldn't see him. And if they did, they only called him.
I got it. Thanks. Oh, shit.
So if you can mute yourself, I appreciate that. 3 more quick things in the overview of this session. Yesterday brought us to post-World War II. And this is the baby boom. This is when the logjam was unclogged. More Filipino families, but not from my family. Because what happens if you weren't part of the World War II effort? My father had asthma, was too old for the war, was considered 4F, did not participate. And that meant he was unable to participate in the first genuine affirmative action for Filipinos. If you served, you got the GI Bill. It essentially was entry to a Filipino middle class. If you didn't, your family relived the 20s, the 30s, and the 40s, like my family. My mother was not a war bride. She survived Manila during the Japanese occupation. She hid under sewing machines at the seamstress shop so as not to be forced into being a Filipino comfort woman. You don't hear much about the Filipino comfort women, but they were there, as well as other Asian ethnicities. My mother was saved by a Spanish patron whom she called my Lola Angelita. She brought my mom as her own daughter to America, then went on to Spain, and my mother survived, clinging to a group of Filipino women, the comadres in San Francisco, who served as mutual family support. That's the way it worked post-World War II in San Francisco. Before we leave the war, let's not forget the Rescission Act of 1946, because it comes up. It's the lie the U.S. The lie of the U.S. that we should never forget. It impacted the Filipino vets in the Philippines. Members of the USA FFE, the U.S. Armed Forces in the Far East, and the Philippine Scouts and the guerrillas. They fought and got benefits. That was the promise of FDR, Roosevelt. It was Truman who rescinded it in 1946. But many of the veteranos were also members of the U.S. Army, like my dear friend, the late Ernie Mabalan, Don's dad, who was also a guerrilla, but also a member of the regular Army, the U.S. Army. So we draw the distinction between the members of the 1st and 2nd regiments and the Filipinos who are here already who joined the Army and got their benefits, and those fighting Filipino fighters in the Philippines who did not. 2 more points, and then we'll open up to our second day of panels and storytelling. Post-World War II, immigration, where you were in the pipeline and decided what kind of life you'd lead. 1965, the law changed and quotas were gone, but not the backlog. A cousin of mine waited more than 20 years before arriving in 2000. And then one of them was shot dead. They went into the wrong apartment. A gun owner legally shot him dead. It's an irony considering the Furman Tobera story, shot in 1930 for being with the wrong woman. A final point about post-World War II. Martial law in the Philippines. Got to talk about it. Marcos, Filipinos here, not ideological, but certainly geographical. So my father was a Democrat unionist, but darn it, he was from Ilocos Norte, from Uluwag City, Marcos' city, and geographic provincial loyalty is everything when you're Filipino. And so now I want to theorize why maybe Marcos and Duterte are good for us Filipino Americans, because without them, no one discusses the Philippines. And when they don't discuss the Philippines, they don't discuss us, Filipino Americans. We can talk about that. Without the notoriety of Marcos and Duterte, we are invisible. The notoriety aids us, connects us. And now people see the strongman rule of the Philippines and see Donald Trump and say, is this the irony of the Philippines, that the democracy we established in our model, right, to follow, for all to follow, actually becomes the model for autocracy? Marcos, Duterte, Trump. So these are the broad themes, post-World War II, Filipino American history, and everything leads to Olivia Rodrigo, her Filipino father, her white mother, her top 10 hits. We will discuss all of that today. We will have storytelling, we will have panels, we have people telling their stories, and we're joined by the crew of yesterday and also by Dan Gonzalez, the professor emeritus, San Francisco State University, Asian American History, Filipino American History. He's going to act like Jeopardy judge. If someone says anything outrageous, assertion or claim, I'll call on him like a Jeopardy judge to put things into context. But this is a storytelling session. We'll also have panels coming up. So in this first section of storytellers, we begin with someone I've known a long time who can talk about Vallejo, talk about his father, talk about his town, talk about Filipino Americans. Let me introduce to you Mel Orpilla. Mel.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, thank you. I feel honored to be part of this Zoom meeting today. And Emil, happy birthday. You don't look a day over 110.
118 is what I'm claiming now. I'm claiming.
Okay, all right. Okay, so I cannot tell the story about my father. I cannot tell the story about Vallejo without talking about Mare Island. And as we're celebrating the 125 year of the end of the Spanish-American War, Vallejo and Mare Island had a direct connection to that. Why? Because the ships that went to the Battle of Manila Bay, which was fought in May of 1898, left from where? Mare Island, right here in Vallejo. Then they sailed to the Presidio in San Francisco, picked up the troops, and then sailed to Manila Bay, where they very easily defeated the Spanish Armada. And Few weeks later, what happens? Emilio Aguinaldo declares June 12th as Philippine Independence Day, and we still celebrate that today. So Vallejo is one of the very few cities that can claim a direct connection to the Spanish-American War and the resulting Philippine-American War. And this is what started our Filipino community in Vallejo. During the Philippine-American War, some of those naval officers that were stationed in the Philippines came back to Mare Island, and they brought their nannies. So one of those officers brought back the grandmother of our FANHS president, Marion Argonza Hopwood, who was a servant and lived in one of the mansions, or actually in the servants' quarters in one of the mansions on Mare Island. It's still standing today. Also, some of those Buffalo soldiers that served in the Philippines ended up bringing their wives to America. I know that Seattle and San Francisco have the same story, Vallejo as well. George Washington Carter Jr., a Buffalo soldier from Louisiana, met Maria Martinez in Cavite after the war and started a pig farm, but the saltwater crocodiles kept on eating their pigs. So in 1912, he brought Maria and their first daughter to Mare Island, to Vallejo, where he got a job as a carpenter. That year in 1912, their second daughter, Alice, was born in Vallejo. Our first Filipino born in Vallejo was half Black and half Filipino, Alice Realisa Carter. And we're married into that family. So all these old families are kind of interconnected. So Mare Island established itself as the premier naval shipyard and naval repair yard on the West Coast. And so they're gearing up in the 1930s and 40s and building battleships. And who do they hire? They hire the Manongs. My father was one of those, and my uncles. They came to America in 1926. Matter of fact, in 2026, I'm bringing my family to the Philippines to commemorate that 100-year anniversary of them leaving the Philippines to come to America. When the Filipinos got to Mare Island, and usually they got there through Stockton, they got there through San Francisco, they got there through Seattle, they got there through Salinas. So it wasn't Philippines, Hawaii, and then Mare Island. It was Philippines, somewhere else, and then Mare Island when they found out Mare Island was recruiting Filipinos. And the interesting thing about Filipinos who worked at Mare Island was that it was year-round work. It wasn't seasonal. It wasn't migratory. They got a good salary. They were paid as much as $1 an hour as compared to some of the Filipinos that work in the fields at 10 cents an hour. It was year-round work, and they had benefits. So these Manongs, like my father and my uncles, economically, they were able to establish themselves in Vallejo. Maybe not yet to buy houses or start businesses, but economically, they were pretty stable compared to their counterparts in other parts of the West Coast. World War II starts. December 8th, December 7th, Pearl Harbor is bombed, and the first communications of that bombing in Pearl Harbor was received on Mare Island at our telegraph station. Filipinos in large numbers who are already in Vallejo working at Mare Island were very patriotic. They were very proud of helping to build these battleships. They were very proud of building the first nuclear and atomic submarines at Mare Island. They were proud to be on Mare Island, even though some of them were just unskilled laborers like my father, but they were very proud to be part of that war effort. So when World War II started, they joined. My father joined the U.S. Navy. He was sent to steward school in San Diego and immediately assigned to an officer in Pearl Harbor, where he served as a steward, first class, the entirety of the war. Other Filipinos in Mare Island and in Vallejo joined the Army and were inducted into the 1st and 2nd Filipino Infantry Battalions. When we showed the film Untold Triumphs in Vallejo, maybe 25 years ago, we filled up our museum. We had to have it showing upstairs and downstairs because it was the largest midweek event at our museum's history to this day, because so many of those families and a few of the still living veterans were still alive to participate in that showing, Stephanie Castillo's movie. After the war, many of those Filipinos came back to Mare Island to work at to Vallejo to work at Mare Island. My father, who was born in 1906, at the end of the war in 1946, he was 40 years old. He tried to re-enlist, but they told him he was 40. He was too old, so he went back to Mare Island. Then the War Brides Act is passed. So many of these Filipino men who lived in Vallejo and worked at Mare Island or were stationed there because of the Navy brought wives back to Vallejo. After the war, many of these Filipinos started organizations, the American Legion. Of course, we had the Legionarios del Trabajo, we had the Gran Oriente, we had Caballeros de Mazalang, and we had the Filipino Community of Solano County, Inc., starting right after World War II. And we also had the Filipino Methodist Church, which started after World War II because the Catholic churches would not allow Filipinos to join their congregations. So the Filipino community went to San Francisco and got Pastor Marquez, who was a Methodist minister, to come to Vallejo to do Bible study on Saturdays. And that eventually became the Filipino Methodist Church, and eventually turning into Fellowship United Methodist Church. And it really was the bedrock of the Filipino community early on in its development. And some of these organizations or churches are still active today, especially the American Legion. But it was a War Brides Act that really established the Filipino community as we know it today. Many of those men, single manongs, met their wives through the Filipino women that were part of the sororities here in Vallejo, or what we call the auxiliaries of these organizations, of these fraternities, who match-made them with their single relatives or friends in the Philippines. And then they did this pen pal thing. So my father and mother were introduced by my mom's cousin, who was a member of my dad's women's auxiliary of his Legionarios del Trabajo lodge here in Vallejo. They corresponded over the course of 2 years. My father proposed to my mother through the mail. She responded through the mail. 2 weeks before the wedding, my father flies to the Philippines, sight unseen, and marries my mother. And they stayed married till the day my father passed away in 2008 at the age of 101, almost 102 years old. But today, the Filipino community in Vallejo is probably one of the most diverse Filipino communities anywhere because of the complexity of our community, because of how old it is, how many generations of Filipinos here, the mixing of Filipinos with the African Americans, with the Caucasians, and just overall immigration post 1965, how you have educated Filipinos, well-to-do Filipinos mixing with some of the old families. My family, we have 6 generations here in Vallejo. So I'm going to leave it at that because I know my time is up. But I couldn't talk about Filipinos in Vallejo and couldn't talk about my father without explaining Mare Island's role in world history and Filipino American history. Thank you.
Mel, I thank you for that. I just have one quick question. And that is, if you were like my dad who came to San Francisco, Mare Island is, I mean, you need a car. I mean, how do you get to Vallejo? I mean, some people, they were stuck in the city, right? I mean, to find yourself in Vallejo, did you have to have townmates? Did you have to have relatives?
Yeah, so you know how it works is you have a townmate, and we had a large Ilocano population, mainly from La Union, already in Vallejo working in Maryland. And of course, they're going to call their friends, their cousins to come to Vallejo. And you're right, there were no bridges at that time. There was no Bay Bridge, there was no Carquinez Bridge, so you had to take the ferries to Vallejo. But in Vallejo, many of the men who got jobs at Mare Island lived in Old Vallejo in boarding houses. So the earlier community in Vallejo, the Manongs, lived in boarding houses run by families who were able to rent a house or buy a house under the name of their American-born children. So the Juliana family, the Aliga family, the Argonza family, they all had boarding houses. So the men would live there in shifts. So that when the day shift was working, the graveyard shift would sleep in the beds. When the day shift went to work, the graveyard shift was, they would just sleep in shifts in these bedrooms.
Yeah.
And those men then became their family. Most of those men that lived in the Hoyana boarding house where my father lived, all of those men in the house became my ninongs or my sister's ninongs or my brother's ninongs. So that was their family because they
Yeah.
didn't. So they were
They
still
didn't have
part of their family.
Yeah, they didn't have any other family. My
Exactly.
father was my grandfather too, but all his friends were family. Hey, Mel, thank you for sharing the Vallejo story. And if only my father knew people from La Union instead of sticking around those Lawagueños, maybe I'd be talking about Vallejo right now. Anyway,
Maybe.
you're gonna be coming back in another panel, but thank you for sharing that story. Hey, our next storyteller is do we have Judy Pataxil? Is she here?
Yes,
Judy,
I
hi,
am here.
from San Diego, an educator, a storyteller, a FANHS, stalwart FANHS member, Judy Pataxil.
Thank you, Emil. Thank you for hosting this. And thank you to Auntie Dorothy for asking me to be a part of this. Happy Filipino American History Month, everyone. Good to be with you. I am going to be just pretty much sharing my family story. I can interweave some parts of Filipinos in San Diego. I'm the lead author of that book, but I will like to just start off, if I can, share screen. Just going to, again, share more of my family story. I'm going to pick up a little bit from where Mel left off because I am the daughter of a war bride. I will claim to be, maybe I won't claim to be because, but in terms of along the lines of what Emil was talking about, my dad today would have been 116 years old. He was born in 1907. Let me see if I can share screen now. All righty. So my Filipino American story begins, my family's immigration starts on September 4th, 1946. That's the anniversary date of my parents. My father, Eugenio Onario Pataxil, and my mother, Virginia Esteban Pataxil. Even though that begins then, it is again because of the War Brides Act. Filipino war brides entering the United States were exempt from immigration quotas through the War Brides Act. Many war brides immigrated to the United States to be with their husbands. They started families and were instrumental in establishing and growing the Filipino American communities. Before the war, the US Public Census of 1940 listed a total of 1,502 Filipino women in California. And then in 1950, the US Census showed a jump to 5,141. This is a picture of War Bride's arrival. And my mom is the one who is holding my second brother. My other brother has his back turned to the planes, and then my sister is right next to him. So my parents actually, as I mentioned, the story of my family in 1946, the day that my parents were married, September 4th, 1946. But it really starts a little before then, as some of the history that you told and were taught about yesterday, and some of the history told by Mel. My father came over in the late 1920s. He was an unofficial pen boy. He is also from La Union, Negilian La Union. And he came as a pen boy. He was the valedictorian at Baguio High School. He showed lots of promise and intellect. And so the village and the people of the community came together to help raise funds to send him to the United States for an education. However, the Great Depression, racism, and discrimination put a hamper and did not allow that dream to be achieved. So he worked menial jobs. I remember him telling us stories of living, and Auntie Dorothy asked me to share some of this, living the hobo life. That was a word that was used back in the 1930s, where he would jump on trains. And so he was in school in Chicago, but his venture, he first landed in Seattle, went to Chicago to go to school, But again, the reality of racism and the Great Depression, he wasn't able to fulfill that dream. But he came back to the West Coast, worked in the fields, worked in the canneries, and worked in menial jobs until World War II hit. And this is my father in World War II. He met my mom as he was trying to find his sister, who actually was married to my mom's brother, and they met, fell in love. According to them, it was love at first sight, and they got married in 1946, as I mentioned. They established, since my dad was able to become a U.S. citizen, they established a family, and my siblings, that's usually older siblings, I'm the youngest of 5, they established their family in Manila in the Philippines, and 3 eldest siblings were born in the Philippines, and I were born here in the United States. In terms of the War Brides Act, I wanted to just share a little bit more of that. They were instrumental, Mel had mentioned, in forming many of the Filipino American organizations that helped establish a lot of the Filipino American community today. This is a picture of the Filipino Women's Club on the beach in Coronado. It's a picture that we used in a recent display that we have up in Chula Vista called the Filipinos of South Bay exhibit. And this picture was taken in the 1950s. The Filipino Women's Club, the Ilocano Friendship Club, the Fava Hall, House of Philippines were organizations that many of the Filipino early immigrants and pioneers formed to help establish our communities.
Hey, Judy, what is that image in the bottom there that you were just sharing?
That's a lechon.
Oh, the lechon?
Well, that was actually part of where the lechon was going to be put on top, but they were shaking hands there.
Did you not get the memo about the vegan pictures required for this?
No, sorry.
Just kidding.
Actually, Emil, I know you are vegan, and so this is a vegan picture because the pig is not on there yet.
There's the pig there. Okay. Okay.
So I will wrap it up with just going full circle. The early community in San Diego, again, was it was the women. It were the women who were the culture carriers, who taught us to preserve our culture, who taught us to carry on. I had the opportunity to be on a panel at the 40th anniversary conference where the women of War Brides talked about how they really established and helped carry on the cultural traditions in our lives. But I wanted to just end with coming full circle with starting part of, even though our immigration story started with my parents' marriage, it was my father who, because of him being a World War II veteran, a U.S. Army World War II veteran, and my mom becoming a war bride, that is the reason I am here today. And part of that, in terms of the alternative universe, I probably would not have been here if not for that. But during my presidency, one of the things I focused on was making sure that the Filipino World War II veterans got the honor respect that they deserved. And that was the awarding of the Congressional Gold Medal through Philvet Rep. I was honored to be in Washington, D.C. to receive the Congressional Gold Medal on behalf of my father and on behalf of my family. And that's just a little bit of my story, being the daughter of a World War II bride, the daughter of a World War II veteran, a manong who worked the fields, who worked the canneries, and who was an unofficial pen boy. So I will stop there.
Well, great. Judy, thank you very much for that. I mean, your father was able to do it all. He was able to be young enough to join the military, first of all, and that was a big boost. But a rich story, a war bride story. Thank you very much, Judy Pataxil from San Diego. Okay, next we have on our list, Chris Underwood. Are you there, Chris? Is Chris Underwood there? And, oh yeah, hi, Chris, you're there. Unmute yourself, Chris. And Chris is going to tell a story about how he was adopted by an American family. Chris.
Hearing from the testimony of other presenters, it appears to me that I have much more unique experience on how I got to this country. Many of the presenters had said that they came here because their parents were here or came here or they were in the military. But in my particular case, is the uniqueness part of my story is that how do you think a 9-year-old boy from the Philippines could come to this country? I was born Crisanto Castillo to Hospicia and Antonio Castillo in a barrio called San Carlos, Rosario, Batangas, Philippines. I was born in 1935. How did I get to come to America? The unique part is that during the war, the United States Army set up encampments near Rosario, in which a company called, or a group of companies called Base R. At that time, Base R needed workmen to work in the camp, and they recruited working people from our barrio. And during the time that the American recruiters came, they picked up workers every day and took them from picked them from Rosario into Batangas, which is about probably maybe 25, 30 miles from our barrio. I observed when they pick up the recruits to go to work, they always came in early in the morning and it was dark. And I observed that while they were being picked up, they had to be on roll call by the foreman to get transported to where their workplace is. I got the idea that, wow, this may be my chance to experience what it is like to escape from my village. So while they were doing the roll call, I hid under the army truck. I lay down under the bench seat of the transport vehicle. So when we got after they picked the workers up, it was difficult for me to hide under the seat, because I was laying down and it was difficult to bear the hard highway that bounced me around. But I had to keep patient. I have to be cognizant of what might happen in case they discover who this little boy was. So when we got to camp, the workers were issued picks and shovel. And so what did I do? Being I was there, I went ahead and grabbed a pick, and I started following where they were digging ditches and trenches. I did that for about a week. They did not question why a 9-year-old boy would be there working. They observed that I worked harder than any of the adults, that I took lesser breaks than they did. And fortunately, when they saw my industriousness, they went ahead and tolerated me going back to work. Fortunately, I happened to work and dig ditches around the tent of a mess hall officer's tent. During that time, the mess hall officer, Chief Warrant Officer King, saw me and said, you're too young to be doing this job. I'm going to have the foreman assign you to me. That assignment meant that I had to take care of their quarters, and then after their quarters, their laundry and many other things. And one officer King said, I have a better job for you. I'm going to make you a mess boy. And at that time, I didn't know what mess meant. And I thought, wow, what am I going to do to be messing around? And he said to me, I'm going to assign you to be serving company officers 3 times a day. So that's what I did. And at that time, we had a visitor, an army officer uh, that was ready to be discharged from the military. And he saw me, I served him, and he apparently uh, saw how industrious I was. And he said to me, I want my friend to bring you to my establishment. At that time, my the name of the person that I served was Lieutenant Gary Underwood, and two of his friends that were also in the military were being discharged, and they decided to buy Army surplus business, in which they did. And Lieutenant Underwood said to his friend, "Bring Crisanto to visit my establishment." And at that time, the army was being disbanded. Many of the personnel were being sent all over the world. And at that time, before all this happened, uh, many of the GIs that I knew said, "We want to take you to the Philippines, and we will do it whatever it takes, even to the extent of smuggling you." And when I revealed that to my mother she said, "Smuggle you? No way would I allow you to do that." And so at that time, then when Lieutenant Underwood said, "I want you to be to visit my company," so I did. And at that time, I thought, well, okay. Lieutenant Underwood says, "I want you to be here with me." And so at that time, I said, okay, this is the best place for me. So I did that. I worked when I was 10 years old at the establishment. I worked half a day, went to school half a day. And then that was in 1946, about September or October of 1946, my biological mother, my adopted mother came in 1946. And it was thereafter that when my mother came that I became adopted by the Underwoods. And all the time before my adoption, every time I went with them any place, I was introduced as being, "This is my boy."
Hey, Chris, tell me,
Oh.
where did you end up growing up once you were adopted? What city in the United States?
I didn't quite understand. Do that again.
What city in the United States did you grow up in once you were adopted? Where did the Underwoods live?
After I was adopted, and then my adopted parents, my adopted mother came in back in 1949. My adopted father in 1952, and at that time, they started the process of having me admitted to the country. It took them 2 years. They had to petition by the help of Congressman Fernandez and Senator Clark P. Anderson to introduce a special bill admitting me to this country as a natural-born child of the Underwoods. And it took them 2 years to get that done. And then after a special bill was introduced in Congress, it got accepted to the both houses, and the admission to this country came into fruition in April of 1954. That is the time when my dream of coming to America came into fruition.
And where did you end up growing up? What city? What state?
Tell me again.
What city? What state did you end up growing up?
I lived in San Francisco, and then 2 days later, I ended up in Albuquerque, New Mexico, because my parents lived here in Albuquerque, New Mexico. When I started high school, I graduated high school from Albuquerque, New Mexico in 1956.
Yeah.
Graduated there, and then I went to college, where I met my wife, who has been my wife for 60 years. We met in college, when
Well-
both she and I were members of the Cosmopolitan Club and University of New Mexico.
Chris Underwood, thank you very much for sharing that story. I don't think I've ever heard an adoption story quite like that. I think the only thing that would top it is if someone was adopted by Angelina Jolie, but that's not the case here. But that's really an interesting story. Chris Underwood, thank you very much for participating in our
Well, I
story.
want to thank you for giving me this opportunity to present my how I got to this country. Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Chris.
Emil,
right.
real quick, Alan and Arnell, you all are the host. There is a request to turn on the closed captioning capability, which only you can do as the hosts.
Okay.
Other than that, that's all I want to pass.
Oh, great. Well, let's do that for people who like that. I think it could be helpful. So we'll do that. But let me introduce the next speaker in our storytelling session here. And it's a man that I know. He represents Metro New York FANHS. Joey Tobacco, an interesting story that Joey has, very different from others as well.
Before you do that, whoever made that request, can you do that? Because I have no idea what that means.
The closed captioning?
Yes.
Alan, if you make me co-host, this is
Yes.
Lillian, I can do that.
Where are you at?
Please make me co-host.
Where are you, Lillian? I can't see you.
She is.
Can you do something?
Yeah,
Where are you?
Alan.
She's in the bottom of my screen, but I know that doesn't.
She's in the middle of my screen.
I don't even see. Oh, you don't even have a face. Okay, is that you? Did I do it? Is that you? Did I do it, Lillian? Is that the?
Thank you.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Lillian
Thank you.
She'll close caption everything. And so now, Joey Tobacco. Joey, tell me about your interesting story about being a member. I mean, we've heard, the adoption story. Your father was a member of the Counselor Corps.
My father, first of all, before I start on this, I am most honored that Auntie Dorothy picked me to be one of the people for this Zoom session. My father was a member of the administrative staff of the United Nations. Let me get over to his, what do you call the Zoom link there. Okay, my father was born in July 27th, 1918 in Toloto, Tagbilaran, Bohol, Philippines. He obtained a BA at the Bohol Trade School on a scholarship. The Bohol Trade School is now part of the Bohol Island State University. It was the first Thomasite school in Bohol. In early 1941, he was drafted into the U.S. Army because he could read and write English as well as type. This is probably because of his mandatory participation in ROTC while he was in college. I don't think that's a big thing anymore in the Philippines. Anyway, because of that, he was able to marry our mom, who was from a neighboring barangay of Abuhan. In 1945, he was discharged from the Army in Manila and got a job teaching industrial arts at the Manila City Schools. He also worked as a houseboy for some of the American officers he served with while he was in the U.S. Army. While working there, he found an ad looking for Filipinos who would like to work in the United Nations Secretariat and applied with the references from the officers. Somehow, serendipitously, he got the job and immediately went to New York City in early 1946 before the Philippine independence. That's why we haven't been able to find any immigration papers on him, since he didn't really immigrate. He just came over here as a U.S. territorial citizen, I guess. He was the first Filipino citizen employed by the United Nations Secretariat and got called on the carpet by then UN General Assembly President and Philippine UN Ambassador Carlos P. Romulo, who wondered who the hell he was and how he got the job without his knowledge and consent, being just a provincial from the barrios. Because back then, the diplomatic staff from the Philippines were all appointed by Carlos Romulo being also the Foreign Secretary of the Philippines. When the UN completed family housing in Parkway Village in Jamaica, Queens, he brought my mom to the US in 1947. The reason for this is that it was very difficult for non-white people in New York City at the time to find suitable housing in New York City near where the UN was. In 1953, with the help of a VA home loan, he found a house in New Hyde Park, which is where the UN was located at the time in Lake Success, New York, and bought the house with a VA loan. Queens County in New York State is also home of New York City's Little Manila and the location of the Benigno Aquino Triangle. So there's a lot of Filipino, connections there in Queens, New York. In 1999, both of our parents got almost automatic American citizenship, having been here since 46, 47. And my father being a U.S. Army veteran, and his dream of going back home was not going to be, done. He was planning to go back to the Philippines after he retired in 1980. But because my mother wanted to stay here with the kids in New York, he wasn't going to go there since our home was basically New York City. Here's a picture of my family in 1966, just before the last time that I went with my family on a home leave to the Philippines. What was that?
It's not showing.
Oh, okay. Wrong one.
There we go.
There we go. There's a picture of my family. And this is the Tobacco Family Homestead in New Hyde Park. The house to the left there was what it looked like when my father moved in 1953. And because of the large size of our family, it got built up to that. So that basically is my presentation there.
Okay, so thank you, Joey. I look forward to seeing more, telling more New York stories. But that's a fascinating one about the UN and about your father. All right, our next storyteller is Tess Guerzon, who will talk about her mother coming for business from the Philippines and her summers selling at state fairs. So Tess, are you there?
Emil, before we start, we need to take off the screen share from our last presenter.
Oh, okay. There we go.
Sorry about that.
Okay, thanks, Joy. All right, Tess, are you there?
Hi, everybody. I'm Tess.
Hi, Tess.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
We can hear you, yes.
Okay, great. Well, I just want to say thank you, Auntie Dorothy, for choosing me to talk about my mother and how they came here to the United States. They knew each other. Of course, they're about the same age, same generation. And I would sit and talk with Auntie Dorothy at her office, she would just tell me a lot of stories about my family. And I have a little short presentation that I did have it on PowerPoint, but it for some reason got deleted. But my son is able to help me, and so I'm gonna try to get this going for you and give you a little history about my family. Okay, host disabled participant screen sharing. Okay. Oh. All right, so can I share my my presentation, some pictures?
Yeah, you're a co-host now.
Okay, so how do I do this? All right. We go to the top. Let's go to the top. Okay, so before I move forward, I really have to talk about my grandmother, who, what?
I see it.
Yeah, see what?
Presentation.
Yes, can you see the presentation, you guys?
Yeah, yes, we can see it. Go
Okay,
ahead.
okay. I'm not really tech very good at
Sorry.
this stuff. But
Just
so anyway, before I really talk about my mother, I have to talk about my grandmother, who was the entrepreneur business person that brought us here to the United States. We basically came to the United States as delegates to the Washington State International Trade Fair. And this is the first picture that I found. This is in 1957, Seattle International Trade Fair. That's my grandmother. My mom is on the left side in the black dress. And basically, they came here for the World's Fair in 1962. So let me go forward. My son is helping me, thank you. And so this is just a picture of some of the exhibitors of the 1962 World's Fair. On the right, you see my mother. She had opened up a store in downtown Seattle called the Pearl of the Orient. And that's a picture of her. But because of having 2 kids and marrying my father, they had to close that store, and she had to move that store to Chicago. So we ended up having a store in Chicago till I was like, I don't know, maybe, I'm not really sure of the exact dates, but here are some pictures of my grandmother in Chicago, the Philippine Emporium, the Philippine Gift Shop, and here are some pictures of the interior of the store in Chicago. The nice thing about this store was it was actually very successful because of the right across from the store was the Contiki Ports, which was a Polynesian restaurant. And so a lot of our handicrafts that we brought over from the Philippines were, of course, similar to the Polynesian handicrafts as well. They had wood carvings, florals, shells. So it was very successful. And I believe we closed that store in around like the late 1970s. I was only probably in high school, but we would go to the state fairs every summer till I was like about 15 years old. And we would go to Springfield, Illinois, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, Des Moines, Iowa, New York, Buffalo.
Tess,
Yes.
were you did you have the big knives and forks? It looks like you had.
Yeah, we did. We had the big knives and forks.
And who was buying them? Were there Filipinos there buying them, or were you selling them to white people?
Back then I think they were very popular with the white people as well, but I feel that a lot of Filipinos bought them too for their houses, because growing up I remember those big spoons and forks in the in people's houses.
We used the big you use the big knives and forks, or forks and spoons. Sorry, forks and spoons.
Yes, and they were always on the wall, kind of close to the kitchen, in the dining room. So you can go. No, we would do like a lot of monkey pod. These are a lot of wood carvings were made out of monkey pod, and so we had a lot of Hawaiian, Polynesian, also merchandise, but mostly it was from the Philippines. So
Tess, we're running out of time here, but I want to ask you a question, because your mom's unique as an entrepreneur. Did she notice that she was different from other Filipinos, this entrepreneurial streak, versus, say, others who are more professional, doctors, lawyers, that kind of thing, nurses, but she wanted to be an import-export. She wanted to be in business. Was there something different about your mom in that sense?
I just believe, I think that, it came from my family, my grandmother, who was a businesswoman. When my mom was in college, she opened up a dormitory and made money that way. So she always had like an entrepreneur kind of business mind. And so when my mother and my grandmother brought her over, she just kept with the same business sense. I think a lot of it has to do with how your family and exposure to business, and so she just kept going. And when my father passed away, we kept going back and forth to Chicago doing the state fairs, but she was the first to bring bangus into the United States.
Bangus, the big
Yeah.
ones or the small ones?
Yeah, the fish, yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
The
yeah.
leg bones. Yeah, so she brought all those foods from the Philippines as well. So, but
She's-
let me tell you a few more little. This is the New York World's Fair. I was still a little kid. That was 1964, and then in 2018, I went to the FANHS National Conference, and I was able to see our old location, and that's it. It's already blocked off, and to the left of it was the Kentucky Ports, but in front of it it was the Sheraton Chicago Hotel, which is now the Intercontinental, and Michael Jordan has his restaurant there now. But it was on 505 North Michigan Avenue, so it was in a really, really good location in Chicago. And so let me see what else. And then that's the national conference with Auntie Dorothy. But that's pretty much our story. We came over here. My grandmother came over here, and my mother came over here as Washington for delegates to the Washington State International Trade Fair. And then my mom met my dad, and the rest is history.
That's great. Your mom was the mother of bangus in America.
Yes, she did. She was the first to bring bangus over. I still remember our big old freezer that we had in the back of our house that a lot of people would come over and get that bangus. So,
Yeah, and did you have any surplus? Did you have any leftover forks and knives? And
yeah, we do. There are some leftover handicrafts, I believe, somewhere in Chicago. But when my mom passed away, we were actually we were planning to go over there and pick up all those big, huge statues and spoons and forks, but we never got a chance to do it. So I don't know.
So
we do have a few things in my garage too. So
you know who to hit up for some extra monkey pot stuff. So Tess, thank you very much. An interesting entrepreneurial tale. The daughter of the mother of bangus, Tess Guerza. Thank you very much, Tess.
That's not bangus. It's not only bangus. It was also Philippine handicrafts.
More than bangus. She was.
That was the main thing.
Yeah, more than the matron of bangus.
Thank you so much, Auntie Dorothy.
Step down the share screen.
Thank you, Tess. Yeah, unshare the screen. There we go. All right, our next speaker is Joseph Galura, who will tell us a story about how his dad arrived in 1928, which is the same year that my dad arrived, and how his mother came in 1958. Joseph Galura. Joseph, are you here?
I'm here, Emil.
Hi, Joe. Please, storytell.
Thank you. So I'm doing my presentation in two parts, right? Part one, kind of a timeline poem, because I do work with Emily Lawson with some of our Filipino American history in Michigan, and then slides that illustrate kind of key points in the timeline. So, and thank you, Auntie Dorothy, for inviting me to share. 1906, my father, Atilano Ocampo Galura, is born in Pampanga. His eldest brother, Jose, runs a successful barbershop, first at Clark Field, then at Pearl Harbor. 3 chairs, no waiting. Dad joins him, but becomes a self-supporting student in the 1930s. His co-op at the University of Detroit leads to retooling production lines. His factory turns out planes instead of cars. Because of wartime security, Dad tells people I was not drafted because I was too short. 1933, my mother, Isabel de la Peña Aguilar, is born and will survive the Japanese occupation on La Union. She graduates from Philippine Women's University. Her time there overlaps with Imelda Marcos. 1954, Mom studies to be a dietitian at Wayne University in Detroit. She meets and marries my dad. They try to buy a house in an exclusive neighborhood, but their cash is returned. Their application is rejected because, can you imagine? We are not white. I am Isabel and Atilano's firstborn in 1958. 1963, Martin Luther King calls out discrimination in housing by race in his I Have a Dream speech, the Detroit edition. In sum, our Filipino American family history is a counter-narrative opposing and resisting fascism and white supremacy. Salamat. Let me now share some slides. So this, can you see my screen, Emil?
Yes, we can see it. We can see the screen.
So that's me with.
It's a little small. Can you make it bigger? A little slightly?
Yeah, it's slideshow. There you go. You got it.
There you go.
Okay.
Very good.
So that's me with my dad, and that's my uncle, his brother Jose, right? This is me in college, 1977. That's an original Star Wars poster behind me in my dorm room at the University of Michigan.
We all wore our hair like that in 1976.
That's right. That's right. And then, Emil, since we talked about this a little bit at one of the FANHS workshops, here's the documentation with my dad, right? Depart from Manila, 9th of June, 1928. Then there's the boat ticket when he went to California. He only worked cutting hair with my Uncle Joe for about a year. And then I got this picture visiting the house he grew up in Pampanga. This is my dad and his other brother 1 year in Detroit. They sent it back to my grandmother. You know, they had to put on their best, right? Got a picture that's Fountain, Belle Isle in Detroit, right? Telling their mother, we're doing okay here in Detroit, even though it's the middle of the Depression in 1930, right? And then, as we heard yesterday, a line my father always told me about having to study hard. And again, his experience in the 1930s, you, a white man, apply for the same job and he will get it because you are brown. Believe me, I know. Dad's wedding picture with my mom, 1956, right? And then a page from the book I co-wrote with Emily Lawson, right? This is my mom taking me through sites from family stories about World War II. That one picture, significant, 1999. We found the house they lived in during World War II and the trap door where my grandfather escaped from the Japanese soldiers, still there, and she's pointing to it. So my mom, after we did the book in 2002, attended every FANHS conference until she was diagnosed with terminal cancer, right? So there we are with Johnny Itliong. Thank you, Joni May Cordova, for taking this picture, right? I'm also going to mention my father was a Mason, right? And then on the other side, another page from the book, right? My Aunt Masi was married a white American soldier, was one of the first in 1946 in the Detroit area, right? everybody in my generation called them Aunt Marcy, Uncle Homer. And this is a story where the Filipino community would gather, right? And my peers asked me, so why is it that we never see Uncle Homer and Santa Claus same time? Right? Because well, they needed a white person to play Santa Claus back in those days. Then here's what MLK actually said about housing discrimination in Detroit. Motown produced a kind of hidden word album. And then the last thing I wanted to do, right, this is what the Filipino American community looked like in Detroit, Rizalde in 1941, and there's my dad, second table on the left.
Wow. You know, every community has a result. Like I saw one in Chicago at the FANHS convention of Chicago, and you could pick out the people who are happy, the people who didn't pay enough for parking, the people who, you know, didn't pay enough for the babies. You know, it's a great shot because that's Filipino America, right? In, you know, circa that, well, 41, right? I've seen some in the 30s, but a great picture. Hey, Joseph, thank you very much for sharing your story with us today.
Yeah, you're welcome, Emil.
And really, I appreciate the Detroit. And to finish up this section of storytelling, we're going to go to a woman who, you know, she listens to the web show I do. I know, and she was very excited that she was picked by Auntie Dorothy. She's going to talk about how she came here as a student. And she's going to talk about the old timers, and she's going to talk about her children and grandchildren. Let us welcome Lourdes Markley. Lourdes. Hi, Lourdes.
Hello, everyone. My name is Lourdes Julia Bacalso Serrano Markley, originally from Nagilian, La Union. Do you know someone who came to America as a student visa? If so, did he or she came here alone? I came alone in 1963. Have you ever been late in school? Like 15 minutes late? Well, I'm not only 15 minutes late, I was 15 days late in school. Guess what? I decided to write President John F. Kennedy. In 3 days, I was flying to United States of America in October 3, 1963, via Northwest Airlines, and my port of entry was Anchorage, Alaska. I was supposed to be in Seattle University, but I had first to go to a community college, maybe to work on my Ilocano English accent. But there was also a deal that if I have a U.S. high school diploma, all my 2 years civil engineering courses will be credited. So I went to Seattle Community College and I met Charles Markley, my classmate in Acting 101 or Drama 101. He was taking a class to avoid draft, and I was taking the same class to fulfill my student visa requirement. In college, I was a working student, and it was really hard for me to do all my homework that I could hardly read my assignment. in my class where I met Charles Markley, my teacher, Mr. Criley, paid us together to do a script. After a few practice sessions, Charlie asked me if he could take me out. And I said, is that a date? Do you know that if I go out on a date, I need to have chaperone? And I brought my 12-year-old cousin, Ricky Bacalzo. After a few dates, pizza date, he was then a working student, Charlie warned me, Lori, if you want to go dates with me, you better get rid of your cousin. I asked him, what did he do? Well, he ate more pizza slices than me. Well, I didn't know that to go out without chaperone is exciting, ecstasy feeling. I had my first kiss and I loved it. Well, in 1970, I finally graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Education. Coincidentally, Charlie proposed and we got married in December 31, 1970. One time or one evening, Charlie said he thought I was a cold-blooded Pinay. For your information, I have 3 wonderful, healthy children, adult now. Julie, a lawyer. John, medical doctor. Maria, a special agent, now working at NASA, formerly worked in NCIS for 15 years. Now my involvement with FANHS, Manu Fred Cordova asked me if I could be a member of FANHS as a national trustee. Of course, I said yes. It was an honor, and I served as national secretary for maybe 8 years, national trustee for another 8 years, also an Oregon chapter president and vice president. And Manang Dorothy Cordova is and was crediting me for starting the chapter. We have now 40 chapters.
Lourdes, well, thank you for sharing the story of being a cold-blooded Pinay. Someone says we should have T-shirts made with that saying.
Thank you. I forgot to tell that because Kennedy helped me. And he was a Democrat. I've been a Democrat ever since.
All right. I mean, I'm sure we're trying to be nonpartisan somewhat, but there's a statement from Lourdes, and I think it's safe to, well, we're not going to be partisan, but thank you, Lourdes. Thank you for that. You know, this wraps up just our first section of storytellers. We have more panelists coming. I'm told that some people like to take a break after an hour or so, but I think we have some momentum. So I think if you want to go to the bathroom, just don't keep your microphone on and mute yourself, and then you may excuse yourself, keep the speaker loud. But what do you think, Alan? Should we? No, so
It's your call, Emil. It's your call.
Let's just power through. If you need to take a break, you can, like I said, you can go to the bathroom, but just keep the speaker on and your microphone on mute. But I want to go on to the next panel of speakers because we also have not just the storytellers, but we also have our panelists who will talk about our changing communities and our divided communities. And so for the next group, we're going to talk about the immigration law in 1965 and how that changed. Before we come up, I want to point out that there's something special about what Lourdes says as a student visa. And Daniel Phil Gonzalez, the professor emeritus, San Francisco State University, College of Ethnic Studies. Dan, yeah, this is a significant thing about the student visas, right? In the 50s, because if we're going to talk about post-World War II, we talked about the brides, the war brides. We talked about the GIs. But tell me about the student visas briefly for like a minute, Dan. Tell me about the significance of Lourdes's story.
Well, first of all, many of the earliest professionals that were able to pass stateside licensing did that because they were students, came in as students, were educated here, particularly for grad school. And as a result, they were able to pass local state licensing requirements. That's really different from most 65 arrivals. I'm sure that issue will come up when we talk about the post-65 period. So they were among the first professionals. Many of them were in medicine, nurses, doctors. A few were accountants, okay. And many more actually had finished their master's degrees here in education. The problem was racism for that group. So two things. One, it was easier then to convert from the student visa to permanent residency. And so a lot of people became permanent residents and then eventually.
Yes, still on. I'm going to.
Yeah, if you can mute yourself.
Eventually applied for citizenship. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I just want to point that out because there are these forces happening post World War II. The GIs, the war brides, but also the students, the student visas, and it's an important thing to note. So thank you, Dan. All right. So now we're going to go to our next panel. And this is the 65 immigration law, how it changed the dreams and the realities of Filipino Americans. And let's bring up Ruben Salazar, who's going to tell a story about family reunification and about his sister. Ruben, are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Can you give me screen share?
Yes, Alan will give you screen share. And then you'll have your 5 minutes or so. If you've noticed, I've gone a little long to allow people to tell their story, but I think you have screen share. Go ahead.
Now, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I'll be brief. I'll try to stay within less than 5 minutes. But it's a hard act to follow Lourdes. I really wanted to hear more about her story. It's more like a real drama or a movie story that I look forward to hearing more about. But anyway, I'll be talking about our family's immigration stories, which started in 1965 all the way to 1988. This is my family. There's 7 of us. I'm not sure whether you can identify me over there, but I'm the 3rd from the right, from my right. I'm actually the youngest in the family. There's 3 boys and 3 girls. 4 girls. Oh, 4 girls. So how did we come to America is what I will be talking about. This is because not very many people know about this. When we talk about 1965, we talk about Immigration Act, but there's also an exchange visitor program of 1948, which was created to bring people from other countries where they would work and study for 2 years and learn about American culture program, then specifically target the Filipino nurses. But this is how my sisters actually came to the United States, through the exchange visitor program. My sister Corazon graduated from the University of the East Nursing in 1963, went to the US in 1965, and worked in Philadelphia Graduate Hospital of University of Pennsylvania. So she's an interesting experience there, because she was actually working as a nurse at Manila Doctors Hospital. And I don't know whether you guys knew Manila Doctors, but that's one of the best hospitals in the Philippines at that time. And she said that over in the US, where she went in Pennsylvania, it's like going back over 10 years, because their facility is not as modern as Manila Doctors. But that's what happened to the nurses that came in the 60s. They were assigned to hospitals in the remote areas. So in fact, she moved to Chicago thinking that it would be better. She moved to Chicago, Mount Sinai Hospital in 1966. But I also want to go back and say that, well, some of you may have heard the Chicago Massacre, which happened in Chicago in 1966, where 8 nurses were murdered by Richard Speck. One of them is a Filipino nurse, Merlita Gargulo, was killed, but the other nurse, Corazon Amurao, survived. Okay, I think I didn't say that correctly. She actually was a survivor. Her name is Corazon Amurao, and my sister's name is Corazon as well. So it was very difficult for us, because communicating at that time was not as easy as it is now, where we have Messenger and Viber and everything else. So when we heard that Corazon is one of the nurses, obviously our family was devastated, because we didn't know if it was my sister or some other Corazon, but luckily it wasn't my sister.
You know, Ruben,
Yes.
for some of us who were alive back then, this was major news. This was one of the first big mass killings, and I don't think people were really made aware that there were Filipino nurse victims until much later. I just remember as a kid seeing the coverage and how it was splashed on the head in the front pages of the local paper in San Francisco. It wasn't later that I found out that there were Filipino nurses involved, but it's and you were in, where were you? You were in.
I was still in the Philippines at that time.
So your sister went ahead. You're in the Philippines, no communication, and your family is despairing because they think maybe
of course
sister has died. Yeah.
Yeah, and this was in 1966, and it is in Chicago where it happened. One of the deadliest murder with 8 nurses being killed. So it was a very difficult situation. But then when I went to Chicago, I actually saw the area or the hospital where this woman or this 8 nurses actually worked. And again, as I said, the nurses that came in the 60s all were assigned to not so very nice neighborhood. It's for those of you who knew Chicago, this is definitely in the south side of Chicago, where it's not as easy, or it's racially lots of crime going on in this part of the city. But anyway, moving on, my other sister, Australia, graduated from the University of the East in 1964, but she's in medicine. So she moved to Ohio, also as part of the exchange visitors program. So the exchange visitors program is supposed to, the rule is that you only stay for 2 years and then you have to go back to your home country. My sister Corazon did that and stayed 2 years in the Philippines. But Australia, who's in medicine, actually did not go back to the Philippines because she was in medicine. And I asked her, why was that? I guess they were given priority because the US actually needed more doctors at that time because it was during the war in Vietnam, and they're definitely needing more doctors here in the United States. So they were given an excuse or an extension. Then comes the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965. This is where I come in because Corazon and Australia, who both came here as exchange medical staff, were able to get their permanent resident visa. So it is through them that the rest of the family came to the United States. They were able to petition 4 of us siblings because we're still single at that time. So my sisters Zenaida and Ligaya were already in the US with student visa and working visa. So it was easy for them to get their permanent visa. Whereas me and my brother, Danny, were still in the Philippines, but we also were able to get our green card. It is my other brother, Renato, who had difficulty because he was already married at the time. And the Immigration Nationality Act, family reunification, only prioritizes your parents or your sons and daughters, but not brother or anyone who is already married and has family. So for him, he had to wait for 15 years before he was approved to get his green card. So it took from 1965 to 1988 before all 7 of us siblings were united in the United States.
Oh.
So that's my immigration story.
Well, that's incredible because in 1965, the act was supposed to be so liberal to allow the wave, right, of all Asian Americans. And yet still for the Filipinos, there was a delay. And I had family myself that signed up after the 65 Act and didn't arrive until 1990s, the late 1990s.
Yes,
so,
there was a big backlog. So what my sister did was, instead of sponsoring us, she had to sponsor my parents first because it's easy to sponsor the parent. And then my parents actually sponsored us. But only us who are single, my brother who's married was the one who took the longest and took over 15 years wait before he was able to come to the US.
Ruben, thank you for sharing that story because I think a lot of people didn't know how complicated. I mean, you can hear how complicated the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965, the Hart-Celler Act, was. When you hear your story, you say, "Oh, it can't be that complicated." No, ask Ruben. He's in Detroit. He'll tell you all about it.
Chicago,
Ruben,
actually.
Oh, Chicago, right? Chicago. Yes. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Auntie Dorothy. Thank you, Emil, and
thank you. Thank you for sharing that story. All right, now unshare your screen, and we'll introduce the next speaker. I think Ellen Abeliera is our next speaker. Ellen, are you here? Or is it Eileen? Ellen? No? Okay, let's go to Maria Bateola.
I'm here now. Ellen.
Oh, Ellen. Oh, sorry, yes. Ellen. Okay, Ellen. Hi, Ellen. Ellen's going to talk about leaving the Philippines and her career in America post-65. Hey, before you go into your story, did anything about what happened to the Filipinos in the 20s and 30s or 40s or 50s, did that bother you at all and say, maybe I shouldn't go to America?
Not really.
Okay.
Yeah,
great.
A little bit. But thank you, Emil, and I want to thank Manang Dorothy for the privilege of being able to share today. And good afternoon, everyone. I just really want to share that I came in Seattle actually in August 1980 with my 7-year-old daughter, Francesca T. and Eddie, and to actually try the American dream, fleeing domestic violence situation in the Philippines. So we knew that we transplanted ourselves in a new environment with nothing, with no jobs and no financial security. And when we applied for jobs, we were always told, go home to your country. You don't belong here. You are brown. Do you know English? So that was just an ongoing thing whenever we went for to apply for jobs. But it's okay. I think at the time, we were just the only thing that we had was great courage and deep faith in God. My father, Go Jose Martino, in Aklan, Philippines, would always tell me. And of course, we had the blessings of my father confessor, the late Cardinal Jaime El Sin. So we actually left the Philippines, the corporate world, as you would say. I was an executive recruiter for the Construction Development Corporation of the Philippines, and at the same time, leading the Transcendental Meditation movement in the Philippines as president of the Philippine Foundation for the Science of Creative Intelligence, because Transcendental Meditation techniques was actually really very popular at that time for executives. And so I was tasked to actually do residence courses for high government officials, including the Department of National Defense, the Philippine Army, the Philippine Air Force, as approved by the late President Ferdinand Marcos.
Ellen, you helped the military meditate?
Yes. And
they
then
should be more peaceful than they were.
but Eddie at that time also was actually the vice president and controller of a big telephone company. So we knew that hard work will begin. And so because I earned my bachelor's degree in nursing at the University of the Philippines, so when we tried looking for jobs, I had to start as a certified nursing assistant. But yes, indeed, I worked like 3 nursing homes, one at a time, always given like 12-hour shift and always given more patients to handle than the rest of the people. Always being asked constantly, do you speak English? What do you know about this and all that? So, I mean, it was just really very challenging. And the first job of Eddie was a stacker at the Toys R Us, and he did like double jobs, triple jobs all the time. And of course, my daughter, who was 7 years old then, she had to stay with my sister, Cynthia, because so she can go to elementary school with her cousins. But she was always asked, why are you brown throughout the year? Why are you dirty like this and like that? So she never felt welcome, So, I mean, those were very hard for us trying to look for a job. I got married to Eddie, and then I gave birth to our youngest daughter, Teresa, in 1981. And Teresa, I remember, was saying to me in her kindergarten, yes, Mom, how come, my first name begins with, my last name begins with A, but I was always the last one to be given a snack in school. And they always ridicule me because I was the only brown kid, in school. Well, I said, it's okay, everything will be fine, however. But despite this hard life, we just really thought that, hey, we have to get going and we have to be determined. So when life was really hard, it's okay. Our first house was actually a garage, which we converted into a living quarters for some months before we were even able to afford to rent an apartment. But then later on, I passed the board exams for nursing, and then I was able to get a job at Ferker School, which is a rehabilitation school. And that's when life got better. And Eddie also was was he was able to be the controller of the Seattle Yacht Club. So life got better, and of course, so we because my parents were devout Catholics, and so the first thing that we did was actually to really volunteer in at St. Thomas More Church in Linwood, which is still our parish up to now. We did a lot of ministries there. We were able to volunteer in community organizations. Eddie became president of here and the vice president of the Filipino community of Seattle. Then I became the president of the Filipino American Political Action Group of Washington, while at the same time being a co-chair of the Seattle Women's Commission. And so that was good because community organization and advocacy started. But that was also the time when the first murder of the Susanna Blackwell domestic violence murder was happened in King County. And that was really a very big tragedy for the Filipino American community in the Seattle. And so I helped actually with our city council, Honorable Dolores Ibonga, and Vivian Luna, the director for the minority affairs under Mayor Norm Rice, to really put up a fundraising to be able to send the body of Susanna Blackwell and her unborn baby to the Philippines. And that was also the beginning of the community policing, the Filipino community of Seattle with Chief Norm Stamper. A lot of just community volunteerism just happened, all that. Then I had a brief stint at the Everett Community College as a workforce coordinator, and then Governor Garrett, appointed me as the executive director for the Commission on Asian Pacific American Affairs, and I was rehired by Governor Christine Gregoire, and I also worked with Census 2000, 2010, and 2020 as a partnership and government and congressional specialist. But up to now, Emil, it is still a work of advocacy up to this point in time, for our Asian American Pacific Islander community.
And it all worked out. I have just one question. Did anything, you came post 65, but did anything before 65 deter you to say, I'm not going to, I want to stay here in the Philippines?
Oh yes, of course. My parents and also my auntie said, you better just go to the United States because then you can be a nurse there. And because I graduated in 1964, but and Eddie's parents were already in Chicago anyway. But
so it worked out.
Just worked out. But thank you very much, everyone.
Ellen, thank you for sharing your story. We're going to move on. We're going to move on to Marissa Batayola. Is she here? Or Maria, sorry. Maria Batayola. And she's going to talk about her father's an engineer. Is Maria here? No, Maria.
Oh, I'm here.
Maria Batayola? No. Okay, we'll move on to, I don't think EJ David is here. How about is Jem Doss here?
I'm here, Mel.
Hi, Jem.
Hi, can you give me sharing?
And we'll give you share, and Jim's going to talk about how arriving as a young boy and his adjustments made as a college professor. Hi, Jim. Welcome to the program.
Hello.
I think you've been given the sharing capability. There you go.
All right. Is it showing full screen?
Not yet. It's not full screen. There it is. Good.
All right.
Is that you?
Yes, that is me.
Oh, the professor.
Hello, everyone. This is Jem Doss. I am right now sitting in my dining room in Arlington, Virginia. And this is a picture of me and my mom in Binalonan, Pangasinan, I think, which is my hometown. And so what thank you for asking me to share my story. I and my family arrived in 1968, but actually it wasn't a result of the 1965 law. I think it was really the result of the the Military Bases Act, which was signed after World War II, which is what allowed the U.S. to recruit Filipinos directly from the Philippines into the U.S. Navy. My father joined in 1964, and because of that, even though my hometown is in Binalon and Pangasinan, my mom went up to Baguio to stay in dependent housing, and that's where I was born. So, so Baguio is where I was born, but Binalonan is my hometown. So I didn't really start learning Filipino American history till I was almost 30. And one of the things that I think many of you are familiar with is this book, America's in the Heart. That was my start, like it's the start for many of you. But for me, in the first chapter of the book, he describes building the national highway in his town of Binalon and Pangasinan. And that woke me up, and I was like, oh, we're from the same town. And so that piqued my interest even more. And one of my trips back, I went to see the street that is named after him, where the Balosans currently live, and this obelisk that was erected in his honor. There's also a rock garden in the town square that's been dedicated to him. And so, as Emil mentioned, one of the things I do is teach Filipino American studies at the University of Maryland, and this book is still a staple of my class. So this is the house that I grew up in Norfolk, Virginia. But before Norfolk, we actually landed in Long Beach. This is what I looked like when I was 3. And as you'll be able to tell from my migration story, it's very much about naval bases. So first we were in Long Beach, then we were in Pensacola, Florida, and then finally we ended up in Norfolk, Virginia, where my dad spent the rest of his career. He spent 30 years in the U.S. Navy as a mess manager. And they bought this house in 1977. And so this is pretty much where I grew up. So my father, as I said, joined the U.S. Navy. My mom was, when her first job in the U.S. was as a seamstress. And then she did this new thing called data entry, and ended up working for the post office. She and my dad had myself. I was born in the Philippines. My sister down there was born in Long Beach, and that's her husband, John. So my mom passed away in 1996, and my dad remarried and had 2 more sons. He was not a manong, but like the manongs, he had children who were much younger than him. So that's his second wife there in the middle, Hazel, and 2 more sons, Joseph and Nico. So that's the 4 of us kids. And this was taken when my father passed away in 2021. And these are my sister's kids, who were both born in Virginia Beach. So we're pretty much still on the East Coast. And growing up in Norfolk and Virginia Beach, because of the Navy, it was a big Filipino community. And growing up sheltered, I thought that all Filipinos came because of the Navy. It wasn't until later that I learned otherwise. So I work full-time for the U.S. government in Health and Human Services. That's my paying gig. But my passion gig is really at the University of Maryland, teaching the Filipino American Studies and other Asian American Studies courses. I started in 2007, and this fall, I am teaching my 20th cohort or 20th batch of kids. This is a photo of a reunion held in the 2021. So during the pandemic, one of my students, Chris Canare, who's up there on the upper left, always a community activist. She decided to get up get a bunch of students who'd taken my class together to do a little reunion and tell stories about the class and what it meant to them and what they're doing now. You'll notice one student is highlighted there in red. She was telling a story about one day in class. After one of the lessons, she just sort of sat back and blurted out, "Everything I've been told is a lie." And it's similar. It's a common response when people actually learn the facts versus what they learned either from their families or from erroneous textbooks that erased us and all sorts of things. And so this was a very satisfying event because it let me know that the class meant something to them, and that, you know, this is something that we should continue to do. And my class is always filled. So I have 30 students this semester.
Well, congratulations on that, Jim. And those are your alumni?
So I just wanted to say, living in the DC area, you know, I bump into lots of people and have part of my barcada are politically active. And so, you know, some of these folks on the upper left, the current director of the Asian American Journalists Association, Naomi Tatoyan, my friend Marita, who works for the Asian Americans Advancing Justice, Ben de Guzman, who works for the DC Mayor, Ita Bing, who works for Everyone. You'll notice also up here, Major General Antonio Taguba. I'm also on the board of PhilVet Rep, and we have a scholarship in his name at the University of Maryland. And this is one of my students who received that scholarship. So, you know, down here we have, in this picture on the lower right, the woman on the right, the first woman there on the left is Patrice Cleary, who is the owner of Purple Patch, which the Washington Post just named their favorite restaurant of the year. And the middle woman there is Gina Ortiz-Jones, who was the Undersecretary of the Air Force. She stepped down in March, but she was an appointee. So, and then this picture in blue, myself and 2 other federal employees are involved in the White House Initiative on Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. And I've actually been involved with that since the Clinton administration. So, you know, that's the thing about being in DC is you do get to rub elbows with elected and appointed officials.
Well, Jim, thank you for sharing that. We've got to move on, but I appreciate you sharing, I mean, you being there for one, and telling your story. So
So we are starting a chapter finally here in the DMV. And if you ever will see the video from Black Eyed Peas, the Apple story, at the end of it, there is a protest in front of the White House for the Filipino veterans. And this is a picture of our late Joe Montano and Tito John, who some of you know from the protest. So we are finally in a place where we can start to commemorate all of this activism.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Jim. Jim Doss, professor. And we move from Jim to someone who's teaching not at the college level, but at the high school level. And we're moving her up to this panel. We thought it might be good to include her here. It's Tia and May Andreessen. Tia, are you there?
Yeah, hello.
Hi, Tia. So tell me, you're teaching high school kids this history.
Yeah, I am teaching, and I also have slides, so if I could share, it says I'm not able to.
We'll allow you to share.
Okay, thank you.
Sure, go ahead.
But I teach 11th grade, and this class is the first of its kind at Seattle Public Schools because it fulfills the history requirement, and whereas before it would be an elective, and so it's a really big deal here. And so I just wanted to share a little bit about the class before I have to hop off the call. So again, this is the virtual Philippine American U.S. history course. It was made by the Seattle community, is led by the Seattle community, and is currently supported by folks from across the nation. Of course, I would always love to start with a land and labor acknowledgement. In my class, we really push and support the identities of those who are also different from us. And so solidarity is a really big thing. And so without this class, really without the Third World Liberation Front, without the work of the Black and Indigenous community, it would not be a thing. And so I always like to acknowledge that before I give any presentation about that. And also, as Filipino Americans, a lot of us are settlers on this land. And so a lot of us, our stories are only able to happen because Indigenous folks were pushed off. And some of us here might be Indigenous or Black as well. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that because really our class is about building that collective identity and solidarity. And so again, 50 plus years worth of activism led by Philippine American National Historical Society. So shout out to Auntie Dorothy, Uncle Fred, and all the folks involved. We wouldn't be here without you. And so I always love to give that gratitude as well. But this course has also been built by students from across the diaspora, really, from UW, from the Filipino American Educators of Washington, from different restaurants and folks who are running businesses in the community. And so a lot of this is, again, community built, and the curriculum is built based off of the stories that a lot of folks here have actually shared. And so a lot of community building in this. And again, this is the first time this class has been offered at Seattle Public Schools in this capacity. So it's a really big idea, or big feat. So round of applause to Seattle Filipinos. Yeah. Specifically for my class, I touch on a lot of just the standards of US history, but from a Filipino American lens. And I'm not going to go through why this class is important, because I think we can all agree that learning about your own history is really a key component to being empowered. And also specifically for high school youth, they have been taught their whole lives that they aren't important, just based on how we've been teaching them through the lens of like white supremacy, capitalism, all that stuff. And so this class is really important because it does teach Filipino students and even other students who aren't Filipino that their identities matter, and that their stories matter, and they deserve to be heard. And they can do a lot with their stories, such as some of the folks here have really moved mountains with their own stories. And so that's a QR code. If you can scan it, that's for my syllabus if you'd like to check it out.
Well, that'd be great. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, shoot. Give me a sec.
And this is what high school kids can get in Seattle now.
What did you say?
This is what high school kids can get in Seattle now.
Yeah, it's 11th graders. So it's really great. Just to give like a little zoom in on the class so y'all know we're covering. A lot of it, again, is student-centered and identity-centered. And so we have things like the Family History Project, where we encourage my students to go and interview their family members or even community members that they admire to learn about their own personal histories. We have a cookbook. We have some critical consciousness exercises, basically encouraging them to create their own histories and look at the history we have and really evaluate it from a lens that includes all groups. Also culturals, they share a little about their culture. And also they're encouraged to go out into the community and write on different events that are happening. And so a lot of the FAM events that are happening now, my students are going to, writing reports, and just really thinking hard about it. And I'm gonna try to speed this up so I can get through it. Again, community component, field trips, guest speakers, media presence, community write-ups. Basically, I bring up the slide to share and also have an ask. Our youth really need adults and elders to come in and talk to them. I think there's a huge divide oftentimes in our community between our youth and our elders. And I want to invite those who shared their stories today, and maybe those who have a story that they haven't been able to tell, to come in and speak as a guest speaker in my class, because your stories, again, build our collective experience and identity. Or if you're someone who has access to a historical Filipino something, right? Invite us out to field trips because we want to see it. We want to be there. We want to show up. And if you have an event online or in person, if you're in Seattle in person, we'll show up. And I encourage my students to do that. Or, if you have press.
We have some requests to show that QR code again. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I'll go back to that real quick.
So people can see how they can get your curriculum and your syllabus. And that's great.
Yeah, so this is just the syllabus, the curriculum. If you hit up the Filipino American Educators of Washington. They have actually a whole database of different lesson plans and whatnot. And so I'd recommend hitting them up for
We will hit them up.
resources. Yeah, hit them up. I'm gonna move on real quick because I'm almost done, but I can also just send the link after this
Yeah,
in the
send
chat.
a link because we have to. I mean, I moved you up because I know you have to go. I really
Yeah.
appreciate you doing this because if people just took your course, you can get straight A's in GEMS class at the University of Maryland. So, but Tia, thank you for sharing. One last 30 seconds.
There's a few, just like two more slides.
All right.
Really, again, this is about student empowerment and community connection. Unfortunately, my class has been threatened to be cut since last year. It was threatened to cut. This year, we're kind of going through some rocky things, and so I really support community involvement in this. And you can be raising awareness, whatever, like supporting. And so, I have a few action items here for y'all. Come guest speak in my class. Share your stories. Show that our stories matter. Donate to the class. This could be books. This could be money. This could be whatever makes sense for you. And also, if you have Instagram, we have an account. Social media presence is really important in this day and age. And so the account is right there, Phil M US History 206 on Instagram. And my school email is there as well. And so thanks y'all for letting me speak and connect with y'all. Please hit me up. And again, thanks to all those who paved the way for us. And I hope that this also encourages y'all to reach out to youth and really hear their stories and their connections because they are doing a lot of really great work out here.
Tia, one quick question. Is it threatened because of money? Is it threatened because people don't want this kind of course being taught?
Yeah, so the budget cuts of Seattle Public Schools really threatened it. But there is a student, like we sent out a lot of surveys and whatnot, and over 30 plus students wanted to take this course. And that's a lot for the grade levels right now. But yeah, budgets plus also pushback on general ethnic studies as a whole in this country has been making it really hard for us to continue the work.
All right, we'll spread the word about saving the Filipino class, high school class in Seattle. Thank you, Tia. I appreciate it. And we've got to move on. I've let people go on, but we're coming on to some panels now that talk about the changing communities and about our divided communities. And I want to bring up the people in the changing communities, talking about the fight for civil rights and the problems of new immigrants. And we call up Annie Galarrosa. Is Annie here? I think if not Annie, then Peter Jamero. Is Peter here?
It'll be Ellen. Ellen takes Annie's place. Peter.
Oh, Ellen. Okay. Ellen. And so Ellen.
It's Ellen.
Ellen. Who else is also Ray Pasqua?
Mel Lagasca.
Joey Tabaco, and John Ragudos. And we're going to sort of truncate this panel somewhat, changing communities. But I want to see do we have, let's have Ray come up because we've heard from Ellen already, but we'll have her part of this panel. But Ray first. Ray, are you there?
I'm here.
Tell me about this aspect of changing communities. Post-World War II, we have the 65. What do you see as the salient points to make about how the community changes after World War II and how with post-65 and the Immigration Act, how does it change in your mind the most?
Well, I want to first apologize about yesterday because we were supposed to have a small presentation from the Yakima Valley. And so I do apologize for that. We were having our celebration of Filipino American History Month there in the Yakima Valley. And that is a very, interesting story in itself because the Wapato, which is in the Yakima Valley was the site of the first anti-Filipino riots in the United States. And that community there survived what came at it. First of all, it was, again, a community that was 98% men. and anti-miscegenation laws were there. Those men did not have very many supporters, but they were very important because they could work. They were very, very hard workers, and with the help of the Yakama Indian Nation, they became a permanent community there in the Yakama Valley. And so it's one of very few communities where Filipinos are farmers. They contribute to the economy of that. They were respected, and through hard work, they were able to build their reputation and build a community hall that was the first built from the ground up in the United States. It was completed in 1952. That was primarily a community of men that had intermarried, both with the white population, with American Indians, and I had African American aunties, Mexican American aunties, and so it was a mixed community that was able to continue there. And through the presence of agriculture, it survived, where the children of those families worked for other Filipino farmers. They also went to Alaska and gained a tremendous reputation as good workers, those young men from the Yakama Valley.
Hey, Ray, let me ask you this question. Because of the diversity, because of the mixed marriages, do you think that's what made the Filipino emphasis or gave the Filipinos some prominence, because people were taking them seriously as part of a greater coalition, as part of a greater community? Is that what was happening?
Yeah, there was certainly a respect that came from the things that those men did. But first and foremost is the help of the Yakama Indian Nation. I brought delegations to the tribal council a number of times now to thank them for continuing to support us. The Yakama Indian Nation, actually in the 1930s, they were opposed by the superintendent of the Department of Interior there in Toppenish. He opposed Filipinos being allowed to lease or purchase land on the Yakama Indian Reservation. But there was one chief whose name was Job Charlie, who took the side of the Filipinos, and through intermarriage, when a Filipino married a Native American woman, they automatically were able to get and work on the land that the Native American woman was given, because the tribe is one of sharing their resources, and land was one of their resources. They had things called a 99-year lease also. So several of the Filipino farmers were able to lease land from the tribal members, individual tribal members or families, for 99 years. So that meant it wasn't permanent, but they were able to gain a foothold by being able to use the land for their farming operations. There was also an effort, and the victory of Pio de Cano in the 1941 King County case that defeated a Washington state law that determined that Filipinos were aliens. And de Cano's lawsuit in 1941 that was won, it found that Filipinos were not aliens as far as the anti-alien land law of Washington state was concerned. And so that was a victory. And so Filipinos could then purchase houses and purchase land and lease land here in Washington state. That was a monumental lawsuit also, then settled in 1941. We do see a difference in our community between 1965 and before. A newer multi sex, multi-ethnic, people came to the Yakima Valley after 1965. They came from other provinces, whereas before 1965, the population was primarily men. I'd say 75% of them, and mainly from the northern provinces of Luzon. And yeah, what can I say? They built that Filipino Hall, and they were they were defended by the white politicians that were there in the Yakima Valley because they saw the Filipinos as an asset.
But the Filipinos, in conjunction with everyone else, that was power. That was considered a power, right?
Well, I mean, the Japanese community there was significant there too, and both the Filipinos and the Japanese, they competed with each other, but they were both respected because they could bring economic, good to the Yakima Valley. That's what I would say.
Unfortunately, we have to leave it there.
Okay.
But Ray, I appreciate that perspective. Let's move on to the change. This idea of the changing community, and because of we went long and we're paying the price for that. Let me go to. Let's see. Is Ellen there? Ellen, you were in this.
Yes.
So
okay.
if you could just give me a sense of the changing the community from post 65, the immigration act, and how the community changed, and give me your sense of that change.
Okay, well, thank you for that, Emil. Actually, what I was referring to in terms of changing community, the face of the community, is that we were able to coalesce more as organizations, and that was power, and to be able to work with our legislators, because I wanted to share, the prevention of the deportation of a Filipino family, in Eastern Washington in 2003, and that was, when I was ED of the Commission on Asian Pacific American Affairs, when a family, approached me that we will be deported from the U.S. at this particular date. Please help me. So, okay, I said, the best thing that I can do here is to work with Governor Gary Lack and the Senators Patty Murray and Maria Cantwell, for them to know about this thing and for them to write a letter to immigration that this family did not mean to be overstaying here. They were here legally. They applied for an extension, but then the immigration lawyer was not able to do that. And they were paying him. So that was why. Then I asked, I was no longer president of FAPAGAO by the time, but then there were so many different Filipino American organizations. I said, we can do a rally, a peaceful rally, to make this family stay. And luckily, President George Bush was coming here to Bellevue to have a fundraising. So I told all of these organizations, let's do a peaceful rally, and then just put down there, don't deport this family. Okay, so that was what we did. FAPAGAO did it. All of the other organizations did it. Some members of the community said, oh no, they are illegals. We do not need to help them. I said, no, we have to give them a chance, because this is what they are in this predicament. That all happened. And then providentially, the Secretary of Foreign Affairs of the Philippines came here to actually meet with General Colin Powell in order for them to meet for something. And I said, oh my gosh, this is just very providential. We have the state representatives of the Yakima Valley, supporting this already. We have Senator Patty Murray, Maria Cantwell, Governor Gary Lack is doing that. So I put all of their letters together, and then, and I told Secretary Delia Albert, who was the Secretary of Foreign Affairs, who was going to meet with General Colin Powell. I said, I am giving you a very important document. Can you please give this to General Colin Powell and also give this to President Bush, because this family cannot be deported. I mean, it is not their fault. Hey, after 1 week, 2 weeks, a week, 3 days actually before the deportation date, Then now the immigration lawyer of this family called me, Ellen, I already got a letter from INS that they could stay. They could apply for residency. And I said, oh, great, wonderful. So he came to us like 1 day before we were leaving for the Philippines. And then he said, but there's one thing I need to ask you. You have to be, both you and your husband will be the sponsors. And can you please sign this petition paper and be the sponsors? Yes, I said, okay, we sign it.
So Ellen, this is a political story. Could it happen today? Could it happen today? Could it happen to this kind of thing?
It can happen today. It can happen today. It just happens that it happened that time, but it can happen today. We need to have a coalition of all of our organizations. We can always work together. Thank you.
All right, I've got to cut you a little short here to move on. In terms of the changing community, I'm going to go to someone who hasn't talked. Mel Lagaska, tell me about your perception of the changing community post 65 after the immigration law. How did the changing community benefit us as a community, or how were we set back? What is your perspective? Oh, unmute, Mel.
That was a pretty complex question, and to tell the truth, I was trying to follow the sheet here, and I guess I got a little off base, but let me simply say that there was a lot of stuff going on. The 60s was very turbulent. John F. Kennedy was shot. Our president was shot in 63. In 64, there was unrest in the streets. The Watts riots. The Vietnam War was ramping up. I had just graduated from high school in 1965, and I was doing the Alascaro thing and doing the seasonal work. But I think the youth community was trying to find answers from political folks, from academia, from their parents, from their neighbors. They were trying to come up with some type of database, mental database or resources. But one of the resources I had was the Filipino People's Far West Convention, sometimes called the Youth Convention. That sort of synchronized me with social issues. Pursuing the American dream is something that's instilled in every one of us, regardless of whether you're a naturalized citizen or you're born here. So part of my dream was as a 18-year-old kid, just about ready to get booted out of the house. I came to a fork in the road, like a lot of young folks. Well, people my age back then in 65, we were 18 years old, and I was lucky enough to experience farm labor work, seasonal work, and in 1968, I was able to, after I graduated from junior college, I was able to land a job at Sandia National Lab, which fulfilled one component of the American dream. I got a little bit of an education. I was able to be employed. In 1968, the same year that I was employed at Sandia National Lab, I also was drafted into the Vietnam War. Well, it turns out when we moved from Tacoma, Washington to Seattle, to Stockton, I had allergy problems. So when I went into the drafting, when I was drafted and went into the induction, it turns out the doctor had already sent in a notice that my allergies were not that good. So I received a 1Y classification, not a 4F. But anyway, I ended up working 34 years at a nuclear weapons lab, Sandia National Lab in Livermore.
Hey, Mel, you mentioned the nuclear weapons lab. You also mentioned the protests in Vietnam. Was there a conflict there when you were working at Sandia?
There was a conflict there. There was definitely a conflict. Nuclear weapons and war don't mix. That's a bad terms to be used together. But it was, for me, it was a pace of employment. But there were demonstrations at Sandia, employee and youth demonstrations at Sandia against the type of work they were doing at the lab.
Okay. I mean, I asked this question because it seems like this is the time also that people were becoming aware of civil rights and also what their country was doing, not just to, with race involving race, but involving war and peace. And you're at that age. How was that changing our community? Was it in conflict with?
Oh, well, we had to make some serious decisions. We had to either ignore the whole situation or immerse ourselves into it and figure out how we fit into making positive changes, especially for the minority community. Now, I had on my end, I associated pretty heavily with the Filipino community and with Filipino activism. And I synchronized with a few people in Stockton, like Jose Bernardo, and there were quite a few people there in Stockton that I kind of synchronized with. And one of the things that I've learned at the Far West Convention was you need to focus in on something that's relevant and I guess something that you can actually synchronize with. And what I did was I worked with Jose Bernardo and a lot of other Filipino organizations in Stockton to work on housing. Housing was probably one of your most basic American elements that you can have. And I ended up working on with Jose on the Filipino Center project that was started in 1971. And that project is still in existence. Matter of fact, last year they celebrated their 50th year. And I served 42 years on that board of directors. And it turns out that the Filipino Center has the title of Filipino Center, but it's not exclusive to Filipinos. But it did provide housing. And one reason for the Filipino Center is when they built the crosstown freeway, there's this thing called eminent domain. The city and state came through and just literally took property from people. And it didn't matter. It didn't seem to matter what prices they gave on properties, and but they ended up putting this 4.5 mile freeway right through the middle of Stockton, and it wiped out a bunch of housing, boarding houses and hotels where the old Filipinos lived. And one of the reasons for the Filipino Center was all the displacement of single Filipinos and families and businesses was there was no equitable housing. The government, after they did the eminent domain and created the freeway, they did not come up with a plan to house these folks that were displaced. Okay, so there are a group of students, actually students from UC Davis, that literally wrote a document called, well, it was probably about a 28-page document that documented all the people in that crosstown freeway area and interviews of what they were paying in equitable housing and all the, I guess, all the turmoil that the the crosstown freeway caused when they literally took property away from people because of the eminent domain. Literally, they literally took things, businesses and residential areas away from people. But a long story short, the Filipino Center is the only they call it within HUD, they call it a multi-use. Generally speaking, HUD only finances residential projects. But in this case, HUD financed a residential 10-story high-rise and a 2-story commercial complex. So the Filipino Center literally takes up 1 city square block in downtown Stockton.
Mel, I just want to get to one question as we exit because we have to move along. But I just want to ask you, could the power of what you did with Jose and with the housing, could it happen again today, or is the community too diffuse, or is the fervor not there? How do you see? Was that a one-off that happened when you were acting?
I think the youth community now, the folks that were in their 20s now, are more informed, along with folks like myself who can augment what they're doing. We can use our experience to help resolve some of the legal issues, some of the city government interactions, some of the federal HUD interactions. We can share that knowledge with them. I think that the youth today are more informed simply because of the internet, mass media, the social media, and back then in the late 60s and 70s, we just didn't have that social media network. Everything was on the phone or in meetings. So there was this delay of information.
Yeah.
I think that it helps. If something happened like, eminent domain again, I think the younger generation would have the tools to deal with it.
Well, let's hope so. I'm sorry I have to give short shrift to this, but I appreciate you coming on here talking about the changing community. If you're hanging in there, I appreciate it. But this is what happens when you let people go on, and because you want to hear from them. They have so many important stories. We have a lot of people to cover yet. And I want to move on to an area that I talked about. If you were here at 4 o'clock, when I talked about the broad picture of where I wanted to go in these now almost 3 hours, I wanted to talk about the importance of the Marcoses and the importance of Philippine politics and how it shaped our communities and how it always, my thesis is that our Filipino communities were defined not by ideology so much, but by geography, by where you were from. My father was from Ilocos. He was an Ilocano. So of course he was pro-Marcos, and yet he was a Democrat who was a pro-union man. And I want to bring up the panelists who I want to talk about how the community changed with the Marcoses and with martial law in the late 60s and 70s. And so that means bringing up people like Rodel Radiz, who is kind to hang in there with us. Rodel, welcome to this FANHS panel. And also I want to bring up, we're going to talk also to Rene Syria Cruz, who was an editor of Katipunan and was a student who found his way here to America. And this is where he protested the Marcos regime. And we'll bring up others. But Rodel, give me your thoughts about the changing community and how martial law impacted the community and how it changed us.
Well, as we know, in 1965, during the Delano strike, Filipinos in San Francisco, led by Alex Esclamado, had a food caravan that brought food to Delano to support the Filipino farm workers who were on strike. That coming together of Filipinos who were farm workers and Filipinos in the cities who were professionals, who came as a result of the 1965 Immigration Act, resulted in the formation of the Filipino American Political Association led by Larry Itliong. Now, at one point, FAPA had 30 chapters throughout primarily California. And what they decided to do is that they would rotate the presidency of the association from north and south, from the Bay Area and LA. And that worked for a while until martial law was declared in '72, because as you pointed out, so many of the farm workers, because of their Ilocano roots, tended to be supportive of Marcos and martial law, whereas the professionals who had been in the Philippines, many of whom left because of the corruption and a lot of the repression of Marcos, were more anti-Marcos. So you had a dynamic in the Filipino community where the community was divided, where in 1971-72, I was at that point, as with Dan, I was teaching at San Francisco State University in the Filipino Studies program. And we were attending a lot of coalitions with Chinese Americans and Japanese Americans, and we were all vying part of our own identity movement that was in the process of translating into an empowerment movement. But martial law ended that, while other of our Asian American fellow activists at that time were pushing for the appointment of Chinese and Japanese and other groups. We were so mired in our division that we were unable to be unified on any given issue. If you were for it, the pro-Marcos would be against it, and it would turn out that way. FAPA dissolved in 1972 because the divisions between the pro and anti Marcos issue prevented what would have been a promising organization with so many chapters, which led to the election of Filipino mayors in Delano, in Seaside, in 29 Palms, in about 6 or 7 other cities in California. That was halted by the division brought by martial law. And that lasted until 1986. Right. And in 1986, after People Power deposed Marcos, Alex Esclamado saw the opportunity to unify the community. So he reached out to the pro-Marcos to say, let's be done with the past. Let's unite our community now and get moving. So about 1,500 of us met in Anaheim to form the United Filipino American Council. And the idea was that we would be now organizing to empower our community. But what happened in Anaheim was that the Philam Republicans were very opposed to Alex because he was a Democrat, and they said there would be no way that they would support an organization. And if we proceeded to elect Alex, then they would walk out.
So, so Riddell, at that point, it became ideological. I mean, before it was like I said, it was more geographical, not ideological, but in America, suddenly there was the rise of the Filipino Republicans.
Yes, well, they had been around, but that was where we now shifted from the pro-Marcos, anti-Marcos to now the political divide between Republicans and Democrats. So in order to preserve the organization that we wanted to build, Alex voluntarily decided he wasn't going to run. One of the members of our organizing group was a Republican, Dennis Normandy. So we pushed in order to keep the organization that we wanted to build together. we decided to elect Dennis as the national chair. And I was elected national vice chair of the National Filipino American Council, the NFAC, so that there would be a Republican and Democrat, even though both Dennis and I were from San Francisco. So it was not geographically mixed, but it was politically mixed.
But it didn't work, right? I mean, it didn't work. I mean, it was still the divide between the Republicans and the Democrats.
Yes, but it did not work because of the divide. It did not work because it was a different vision. Dennis had a more business option rather than community. He did not see the need for organizing chapters around the country that Alex did. And so in the next 10 years, we were not able to do what we were envisioning, so we could catch up with the other Asian American organizations. We would be able to push for Filipinos to be appointed and elected and empowered in our communities.
Rodel, I appreciate that perspective, but I want to go back to the Marcos dictatorship. And if Rene Syria Cruz is still here, I know that Rene was a student he found himself here in America, and he edited the Katipunan. Are you here, Rene? If we lost Rene, I'm sorry about that, because he has an interesting story too. Well, let me turn to Dan Gonzalez. Dan, you heard what Rodel said, and tell me about the division that existed and about how the Marcos dictatorship, how it impacted our community, how it has always split the community. And I say this as from a person from an Ilocano household, a split mestizo Ilocano Tagalog household. And like I said, my father was a Democrat and he loved Marcos. So what happened to our community in the 70s and the 80s?
No, I think Rodel covered most of it. It became generational, actually, because some of the people who were post-65 arrivals had children that were born in the Philippines, came here, and they also became pro-Marcos. So for the longest period of time, I think what I would add to what Rodel said was even though there were those of us who were critical of Marcos, even in his first administration, the vast majority of the Filipino American community was pro-Marcos. And that was my experience, my perspective. And they were very popular. Well, they did things. The Marcoses did things in big, very ungracious ways, but that were very popular with Filipinos, not only in the Philippines, but in the diaspora as well. So they were hobnobbing with Hollywood stars, the Shah of Iran, the leaders of other nations, of course. They threw major international events in the Philippines. And so a lot of Filipinos felt that they were bringing positive attention from the world to the Philippines and to Filipinos. And so that was a part of why they were so popular.
Yeah, but how does that square with all that the Marcoses did in terms of Duterte was not the first to invent extrajudicial killings. And
quite frankly, how does it square with the last president that the United States elected?
Oh yeah, well,
people are largely in denial. Those people that are very, very much in support of authoritarian regimes are either lacking in information, or they're both lacking in information and also in denial of clear evidence of people's corruption.
Yeah, Rodel was talking about that difference when the Republican Filipinos came up, and it was no longer Marcos, anti-Marcos, but Republican and Democrat. Now we see a real divide in the Filipino community, where the Filipino community is second to maybe the Vietnamese community in terms of Republicans supporting Trump.
That's correct, yeah.
And just this week in the New Yorker magazine, it's the first time that a mainstream news organization drew the connection between the extrajudicial killings in the Philippines under Duterte, which, before it was Marcos, and drew the connection with the violent rhetoric of the former president of the United States, Donald J. Trump, and how it would be just like Filipinos regret, or how they look at their country and they can't imagine it. They can't recognize it. David Remnick in the New Yorker says, are Americans willing to say the same thing about our country? I mean, it shows how in the 60s and the 70s, that was when the Marcos, regime divided our community, but it seems like we're right back there in 2023.
I want to add one. I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Riddell.
I wanted to just add to what Dan said about generational, except my experience is that the younger people were more anti-Marcos, you could see it in the fact that in universities and colleges all over the United States, whenever Filipino students were together, they were more activist and they were more anti whoever was in power, like Marcos or the others. But there was another issue that divided the Filipino community, and that was at the founding of NAFA in 1997 in Washington, D.C., the National Federation of Filipino American Association, another attempt similar to Anaheim. The issue that divided the the delegates was on the issue of support for gay rights, because a lot of the older Filipinos were very much against gay marriage, gay rights, LGBT issues. And the younger Filipinos attended the conference because their experience with LGBTQ was much more, much greater than the experience of the older Filipinos. There was a point where NAFA almost dissolved right at the very beginning, until Loida just proposed, why don't we just agree to disagree on this issue?
Loida Lewis, you're referring to.
Together on the issues that unite us. And eventually those things were resolved, but that was an issue because of the religiosity and the strong Catholic background. There was a lot of anti-gay, there was a lot of homophobia. So those are the issues, not just political.
So it's moral issues. I mean, are we seeing the same thing with abortion, pro-abortion, anti-abortion?
Yes.
Same thing. So let me ask one, as they say, McLaughlin used to call it the exit question. Where is the Filipino community going forward now in terms of how the politics in the Philippines, really impacts what we do here and how we see ourselves as a community here? And what do you think?
Was that to me?
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Let me go. Let's go Riddell first. Go ahead.
Okay. When People Power deposed Marcos, those of us who were against Marcos, we went on what was called the Freedom Flight to the Philippines, and we met with President Cory Aquino in Malacanang. And President Aquino asked us what issues were we concerned with that we would like her to do. And she said to show her appreciation for the support we gave to the efforts to depose Marcos. And we raised two issues. One was overseas voting. We wanted the right to vote in Philippine elections. And the second was dual citizenship. We proposed those two issues, and President Cory said she thought overseas voting was doable. She did not think dual citizenship could be doable, but she would support it. We continued lobbying those two issues for the next several years until President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo in 2003 finally got the Philippine Congress to pass both. And that allowed for Filipino Americans to become dual citizens and to vote in Philippine elections. which I'm bringing up the point that in the last women's football or soccer, the Filipino community in the Philippines and in the US we were ecstatic by the victory of a primarily Filipino American women's team that had succeeded beyond expectations in the World Cup to defeat the host country. And
so here we are.
And that unified that has been a unifying factor. Now no one is objecting to the presence of Filipino Americans in Philippine teams. Basketball, we just won the Asian Games basketball championship. That there were a lot of Filipino Americans who were a member of the Philippine team because they were dual citizens. So I just is answering, where do we go from here? Well, a lot of Filipinos in the U.S. have integrated, and we have filed legal actions in the Philippines, like the Malampaya issue. Loida and I were plaintiffs because we're dual citizens, whereas those in the Philippines were afraid that they would be arrested if they were the plaintiffs.
Son of a bitch!
What? What happened?
Are you okay? Did somebody stub your toe, or you?
I don't know. It wasn't me.
Somebody scored a touchdown, I bet.
Yes. Someone scored that. Look, Rodell raises a big issue, an issue about the blurring. It seems like we go forward, and after 125 years, we are not. The assimilation is it working? I guess we are Filipinos in America. I mean, Filipinos in America are Filipino Americans or American Filipinos. They're not Filipinos, but I guess they are. What do we do about this blurring, Dan?
As the guy with the round eyes and blue eyes in this discussion.
Jeffrey, go ahead.
Yeah.
Turn up your volume.
Yeah, turn up your.
Okay, let me turn up my volume. Oh, that's why. There it is. Now you can hear me.
There you go.
Yeah. I teach my students. I teach in Virginia. I got mixed classes. I make sure I put all sorts of information in my U.S. world history classes about the Philippines. That being said, I also teach him. I learned this from a African-American professor at Norfolk State. I do away with the idea of the melting pot. That means you want to leach out what's different. Instead, we're a nation that's like a mosaic. Every one of us has a unique shape, a unique hue. We fit into that mosaic, somewhere in it that keeps us unique. We don't want to get rid of what makes us unique. So, yeah, you stay proud to be Filipino American, but I do want to caution you on one thing, and this is my experience as a civil affairs officer in Iraq. Every Filipino American who goes to the Philippines is viewed as an American first. And we don't understand fully what they go through. And especially now they're getting sandwiched between China and the US once again. They're put in a position where who do we side with, the Chinese or the Americans? This is a difficult question. And that's all I got to say on this.
Well, that's a good point. I mean, I just know that I don't make a distinction between Filipino and Filipino American, but I notice that with each distinct wave of immigration, I'm more American than not. I'm not less Filipino, but I am a kind of Filipino. I don't know. This is where we are. And this brings us to our next and final panel. And I thank you for being here still. And Filipino, ? Filipino American, I use the term American Filipino. And who are we? And where are we? And for brevity, you have the right to 5 minutes if you really want it, but you can go less. But let me bring up my friend Titania Buchholz. This is your mother's gong behind me.
I know.
Titania's mother was the first Filipino legislator in Alaska. So Ty, what do you think? Filipino American? What you have a story to tell?
Oh, my story is very, very complex because I grew up in Alaska, where we really didn't actually consider ourselves American so much. Most people thought that Alaska wasn't even part of the United States, kind of like Hawaii. Hawaii and Alaska, even though they became states, quite a long time ago. The cultures are so very different there. There are a large number of indigenous people there. And growing up in Alaska, I was never for a second in the 60s ever thought of as Filipino. I was always lumped together with the, well, what we called back then the Eskimos and the Indians. So I grew up with people of color, but no, not really Filipinos. In fact, I went to the high school. There were only 3 Filipino American children at my high school. There were 2,000 people at this high school. Two of those people were me and my brother. And so we were really minorities. One of the reasons why I live in San Francisco Bay Area now is because I do feel like I'm part of a gigantic community where I don't ever have to explain where I'm from, and people don't ever ask me, to explain myself, which is one of my biggest problems with living in Alaska. Like, where are you from? Where are you from? Really? No, really. So I got tired of that, and I really appreciate being around a gigantic community here in Northern California. What other question did you have? I'm sorry.
Just, what are we? I mean, we established that we're blurred. We are a mosaic that's kind of blurry. Where do we go from here? What is the next way? After 125 years, where are we going with Filipino American?
I feel like the divide between Filipinos born in the Philippines and Filipino Americans is just getting wider. For the past, well, maybe 3 decades, I worked mostly with people who were practicing indigenous pre-colonial music of the Philippines. So that just turned into my passion. I've had a little bit too much education, but that's the thing that I really like to do. And one of the things I've learned is that there's so many 2nd, 3rd, 4th generation Filipino Americans who just want to know more about the pre-colonial aspects of Philippine life. And yet in the Philippines, they go, why would you be interested in that? So the divide is, why do you want to come back to the Philippines to learn more about something that's gone now? I think that's kind of like the people I hang out with in the Bay Area. We want to know more about what is truly Filipino, which is before the Americans came in. We're looking at 18th century, 19th century. And I just feel that we are like almost all Americans of different ancestry. We want to know more about what our heritage is.
Yeah.
Emil?
Yes.
I'm going to have to leave, as I mentioned, but let me just add to this that I don't think the gap is widening as you pointed out.
I pointed out,
first of all, on China and the Philippines, every poll in the Philippines showed that 90% of Filipinos side with the US and less than 10% support China. So there is not a divide between China and the US on that issue. And secondly, if you look at Philippine entertainment, the actors and actresses which are available on Netflix and YouTube, almost all of the actresses and actors are very fair-skinned. Many of them are Filipino American. Look at all the winners of all the Miss Universe, Miss International. They're all half Filipinos, half Australian, half American, half British. So, and they're the ones people go to when they watch movies. They're the most popular entertainers. So the division is I would think it's actually lessening as there is more acceptance of Filipino Americans as part of Philippine life culturally than there had been in the past.
Well, how about American life? How about American life? I mean, people don't even know that Olivia Rodrigo is half Filipino. I don't think.
It's a matter of education. There's a lot of people, but now in Broadway, you have Here Lies Love, which is a Broadway hit. It's an all Filipino cast. There's a lot more Filipino entertainers, whether it's Bruno Mars. So that kind of integration, I would think, should not be diminished.
Okay, thank you, Rodell. Look, we're going to speed along here. I'm going to call up Cynthia Mejia Judici.
Giudici.
Oh, Giudici. Sorry.
Yes.
Sorry, Cynthia.
Well,
I mentioned in Chicago.
I have a story to tell.
Go ahead.
My own story. So my parents came from Pangasinan. My father came in 1929. My mother came in 1951. So I'm the daughter of a Philippine war bride and a U.S. Navy World War II veteran. And, you know, it's very interesting because I was lucky because both my parents spoke Pangasinan at home and I would pick it up. And I know that some of you were probably asked when you were young, when you had visitors, oh, go to the piano and play a piece, right, for your visitors. Well, my thing was I would try to talk to the visitors in Pangasinan. And so, you know, I really like that. I think I'm pretty good with the languages too. So when I was growing up, we moved here in 56 to Seattle, in the north part of Seattle, very predominantly white, but we lived in military housing. So you've got the Navy brats, you've got, you know, the personnel, right? We were mixed, a lot of Filipinos, and my mother would congregate with the women. They would speak Tagalog and they would do their perming. They would do permanence. And then we got involved with Filipino war brides, which was a big family of wonderful people who had the same history of, except that their fathers were usually Ilocano and their mothers were Visayan, so they spoke English at home. My family was a little different because we had a lot of Pangasinan in our family. We were exposed to the language. Nevertheless, so I grew up here in the north part of town of Seattle, and I went to school, and I knew that my roots were Filipino, but I didn't really know what that meant until, well, in 6th grade, I asked Sue Shimpy to come into my house, and my dad was making my favorite dish, adobong pusit. So she comes, and my dad serves her a plate of rice with the squid on it with the ink, and she looks at Jill's, oh my God, you eat that? And she refused to eat it. And then I thought, wait, I'm eating different kinds of food than anybody else. And, you know, it got to the point where later on, we were able to move into the neighborhood, the white neighborhood in 1962, thanks to Pio Decano Sr. And again, we were the only non-white family because the Navy housing had already been raised and all of the people had transferred out. My father ended up retiring here. And then the 3 boys in our neighborhood started throwing eggs at our house, and they would shoot BB guns. And, you know, then I thought, oh, you know, there are people who don't want us, you know, and I was feeling, well, you know, obviously I'm not white. And why does my white girlfriend want to get tan? And why do I want to paint myself white? So I'm going through this identity, right? So we were tied with the Filipino community because my mother was part of the war brides and my father was a council member. And so we would go to the Filipino community and we would hobnob with the Ilocanos, the Visayans, the Tagalogs. But I didn't hobnob with the Filipinos in Central District because I didn't feel real affinity with the Filipino Americans in the Central District. Anyway, I ended up going to college and I got interested in Japanese studies. I went to Japan. I actually lived there, and I came back thinking I became a Japanophile. You know, I was doing things Japanese because they were encouraging me to speak Japanese. And it was such a wonderful community. I had intended to go to Japan to go down to the Philippines, but I fell in love with Japan. I stayed there. I came back. I went to this hippie college, and at the College of Ethnic Studies in Bellingham, part of Fairhaven College, 2 guys came up to me, Kyle Kinoshita and Rick Alteras, and they said, you are not Japanese, you are a Pinay, and be proud of your roots. Whoa. So later on, I got interested in my ethnic background, so much so I wanted to wear a terno to my graduation, and the vice president said, no, you can't walk. And the ethnic unions got together and they stormed the vice president's office and they demanded that I walk. So there I am with my mother's terno walking down as I graduated. So, you know, am I Filipino? Am I American? When am I? I came after I graduated, moved in Chinatown. I worked in Chinatown. I worked with the Manongs, and that's where I met Auntie Dorothy and Uncle Fred. And they mentored me to become an oral historian. And so I was documenting the story of the Manongs. I lost my father when I was 17, so I was trying to piece my father's story through those Manongs. So much so I decided to go to the Philippines and do my roots trip. Now, this is 1976. My brother was dating a white woman. I had been dating white guys. I never dated Filipinos, but I wanted to go to the Philippines to marry a Filipino. I wanted the brown skin. I wanted to have the Filipino background because I'm Filipino. And I wanted my parents to be proud of me for marrying a Filipino. I go to the Philippines. You know what I was?
What were you?
I was rejected. I was not the American that they had seen on screen. I didn't wear Avon makeup. I didn't wear dresses. I was in patrol boots, a backpack, and I was hiking. And they were ashamed of my brown skin. I had my cousin say, look, I'm going to take you I want you bleached. I don't want to hang out with you. And I thought, these are Filipinos. This is my own blood. And the men I dated, the men I met, they wanted to marry me because I was a U.S. passport holder. So do you think of my ego? You know, I wanted to be Filipino. I wanted, be part of that culture, and I was rejected in that I didn't fit the stereotype. And I knew that they wanted to marry me because I had a passport. So I left and I went back to Japan. Anyway, moving forward, we lived in DC. I came back and I met Auntie Dorothy and Uncle Fred again. And
time.
Yeah, time. Anyway, so the deal is that my daughter married the Bachelor, season 17.
That's
Catherine Giudice, right? So I got involved with writing and doing exhibits, Wing Luke Museum, I Am Filipino exhibit, et cetera, et cetera. My daughter marries the Bachelor, and they wanted to know Catherine's background. She's mestiza, right? And I asked my daughters, what did they feel about being Filipino American? And they say, well, when you're younger, you want to fit in. But when you're older, you honor your background. And luckily, my mother is still alive. They could hear her accent. They saw her in her heyday when she was dancing and singing at the Filipino community. My other daughter said FYA, helped her realize her Filipino background because of all the dancing. And we were blessed for that reason. But the thing is, with the Bachelor, the Filipinos who rejected us, the ones who I believe are Philippine born, they said, oh, you're one of us now.
Yeah. Wow.
And that, so I'm kind of in this weird thing. I go to the Filipino community of Seattle and I speak Tagalog. It stinks, but I speak, and cousins, when I talk to them in Tagalog or Pangasinan in the Philippines, they made fun of my accent. So I was not encouraged to embrace Philippine homeland culture. I was so disappointed and heartbroken. So I think what I can say is I think my family's more global. All my children have lived out of the country. They speak at least 2 languages. I speak 3. And I think that we know our roots. We know inside. We don't know all the history, but we know we're Filipino. And they know that everybody is an uncle and auntie, and you respect your elders to the point that you will take care of them in their house until they die. You know your food, but basically you know that we do things as a community, as a family. And for me, that's, for me, it's saying the rosary at a funeral. We all come together and respect our elders who have passed.
Cynthia, I appreciate you saying these things, because another test that you are a Filipino is that you are here 3 hours after we started FANHS American History 101. And if you are here still, I thank you. And if you haven't spoken and we said that you were going to speak, here is my promise to you. We are going to do many more of these, and I will put you right at the top of this the next time we do this. Because I think ending with Cynthia was a good, this is the ambiguity of it all. What are we? Who are we? We will continue to explore this with more of these. And I hope that you go back and listen to all 3 hours of this, because we had so many great speakers, so many great participants. I'm sorry we had to truncate some things, but hey, we're going to do this again. Auntie Dorothy says, she demands that we will do this again. I thank you for being here all this time. Jeffrey says, people have to go to work tomorrow. They're not taking the day off because of your birthday, Emil. Columbus Day, Emil's birthday, he's 118. They don't care. But listen, I appreciate you being, I appreciate this discussion. We were going to have an after show. We had a whole hour after show. Dorothy said, "Cut off, Emil." Jeffrey says,
well, thanks for putting me on last.
Well,
or putting me on at all.
You were an anchor there. Thank you very much. And Dorothy, what do you say? I'll give you the last word. I'll give you the last word.
Well, all the people who didn't speak, we owe them a big sorry. And you're really special. You were chosen specially. We'll do something better for them. And they can speak forever. Okay. So, sorry, Christy. And who else was it? Christy and third, Mel Orpilia.
Oh, Mel got to kick off. He got to kick off about Vallejo, but I know he had more to say. He had more to say. I'm sorry, Mel.
I got to speak yesterday, so it's all good.
Okay. Listen, I appreciate you all. The FANHS family is very meaningful. I was talking to a young Filipino the other day, and she said she wasn't sure if I had Tito status, because we call Auntie Dorothy, and you can just call me Emil. Manong Emil is okay. But, I always feel good and Filipino when I'm in a FANHS gathering. I thank you, Dorothy, for allowing me to do this the last 3 hours. And like I said, if you've been here since the start, you are Filipino American. You are Filipino.
Hey, Emil, I'm going to take control real quick. Christy, talk about the conference real quick, please, if you could.
Oh, yeah. Chrissy.
Where's she?
Hi.
Hi, Chrissy.
Yep. It's July 17th to 20th next year. We had a 1-minute video and all this stuff to kind of show you guys, but it's too late. So thank y'all. Hopefully you guys will see the proposals for request for proposals coming up soon. It'll be in Houston, Texas. I'll be your chair. Look forward to hopefully a NASA tour of Houston. And hopefully you'll get to hear some of the history that we didn't get to today.
Chrissy, you're in Houston now?
I am in Houston now.
Because I was the first Filipino DJ in 1975 at KLOL Houston.
I know we didn't get to talk about that, did we?
Yeah, Emil for real. I was Emil. I played the remote.
I know. Yep. You mentioned that a while back. But good deal.
Gina is a punk rocker. Okay. Hey, thank you, Chrissy, and thank you for mentioning Houston. I hope everyone goes to Houston in July, where it's going to be exceedingly hot and muggy.
I plugged it yesterday.
And all right, and that's it. That's it. Thank you very much, Jeffrey, Mel, Dorothy, Auntie Dorothy. Thank you, everyone. Till next time. There will be a next time. And if you didn't speak, you will go first the next time.
No, Luna will go first.
I'll have my pictures.
The next time will be the conference next year, y'all.
The next time, yes, definitely. Okay.
Great.
Hey, thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye. So let's hey, Jeffrey.
I'll take it, Emil. I got it.
Hey, wait. Nimi,
hold. Go.
I want to save the chat. Oh. I just want to make sure we save.
Yeah, save the chat.
Is Arnell still here?
Nope. If we can do a group shot, can we do another group shot?
Oh yeah,
Can we do another group shot?
Let's take another group shot. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know. I only know how to do it.
Here's the problem with the group shot. We've got people that have blacked out and I can't see their faces. The only people's faces I see are the 50 that are in front of me right now. That's it. No, the 25.
Okay, let's put it on
Well,
gallery.
do what you can.
Yeah. Okay.
Many hours. We can take a screenshot. You can take a screenshot from the recording, right?
Yeah.
You're
Oh,
recording
that's
from-
right. That's right. From the recording.
It just sucks because we're not all gonna be like, hi. But
Okay, so someone tell me if the 49ers are winning.
Yep, they are 21-7.
They're winning. Okay. I don't care. I don't care about sports anymore. My life is FANHS. Okay, no, I take that back.
Thank you, Auntie Dorothy. Thank you. Thank you, Alan. Thank you, Emil. Thank you, Jeffrey. Thank
Yes,
you,
ma'am.
Arnell. Thank you.
Thank you.
It was
everyone.
a great
Thank you.
undertaking.
God bless you all.
Yeah.
Mabuhay,
thank
guys.
you.
Bye.
Thank
Read
you
my-
everyone for
read my
speaking
column
and
up there,
uniting
Wes
the
Love.
youths with everyone, all of
Thank
our
you,
generations.
Gonzalez. Thanks, Dan Gonzalez. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Happy Filipino American History Month. Woohoo!
Yeah.
Yay.
Yeah. Here we are.
Mystery Talk Story.
Hey, Joanne, thanks for coming back.
Oh, you didn't hear me.
Thanks, everyone.
Justagina.
It
Mom,
was
and happy birthday, Emil.
Yeah, thank
Hi,
you.
Auntie Dorothy.
118. I'm copied to my father's age. 118.
I should call you uncle.
Uncle, yeah. I'm uncle. I'm Kuya, yeah. Hey, thanks everyone.
You're
welcome.
Okay, I'll
Oh, they didn't hear me.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, that works.
Manganta yun.
I can't save the chat. Okay. Sadly. Okay.
Oh, go to chat, and underneath there's a save the chat thing.
So the dot.
Buttons.
Oh, there we go. I see.
Got it?
Yeah.
Why do we have to go?
Oh, Jerry has to save it. It's okay. We saved it. We're all good.
Okay, we're good. All
Okay.
right. Thanks,
guess-
everyone.
Okay.
Bye, Dorothy. We'll talk again soon.
Bye.
Everyone, thank you.
Thanks all you East for hanging. Joey Tobacco, my buddy.
I couldn't see it all. There's 26. They said, how do you
Thanks,
see all
Joey. All right. Jeffrey still here? Yeah, he's still here. All right, Jeffrey. You want to end this? Do you want to end this officially?
Yeah, here's what I want to do. I am working the technology with Arnell right now to figure out how to save all this.
Okay. All right.
I'm like the captain of the ship. I'll be the last one off.
Great. All right.
Aloha from Hawaii.
Oh
Bill.
boy. Hey. Hi, Hawaii.
Aloha.
Yes. Aloha. And
Jeffrey, I can try to help you do tech stuff if you'd like support.
oh yeah. Judy. Thanks, Judy.
Thank you, everyone. Take care. Thanks, Emil, Auntie Dorothy, FANHS Now,
Yeah,
everyone.
Judy, if you can talk me through it,
Okay. All right.
Talk you through what?
Thanks.
saving this thing.
Thanks, Jeffrey.
Yes,
Saving the
take care,
chat?
Emil. Oh, Emil, I want to be in touch with you. I got some
Yeah.
things I would like to talk to you about. 'Cause-
Mel. Thank you, Mel.
Okay.
man.
What should I do? What button should I touch?
I'll hit stop recording.
Ah,